All right, hello everybody. Welcome to the WoW News live edition, where I guess technically we're in pre-show. We'll be starting pretty damn soon, and where we all just fought off bots for a bit.
That was fun. That was certainly an adventure.
Yes. So here's the deal: we got dislike bombed, like 100 or so dislikes. There's like 800 to 1,000 people watching right now. So if you're watching, it probably means you've got a YouTube account, and that does mean that you can smash that like button, which at least this time we're kind of justified in saying because we just overcame the extremely fun botting wave.
Yes, please. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. So we're here for the Warcraft news, where there actually is news to talk about this time, which I think is pretty incredible news versus maybe some of the other weeks.
The news that we have something to talk about is incredible. The news to talk about is maybe not incredible, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of drama. The Mythic Plus key situation, I think, it's super typical, like that thing where you guys know how it is. Blizzard, they identify a problem and they kind of do everything to solve that problem, but maybe the baby's been thrown out with the bathwater. So there are, I'd say a bunch of people with, a bunch of people who have got alts and Mythic Plus. They're a little bit frustrated. And then even in the Anima situation, like Blizzard have literally given everybody more Anima, and the reaction has been, thanks, but I don't like it, which has been, enlightening to see, I guess. So fun topics today. I think more and more people are getting their way into the stream, so almost time to start. Joel says, when is the patch getting released? Well, boy, do we have the answer for you today. Oh, man. Yeah. What a time. I think we're pretty much good to start. So let's go, everyone. Let's get into the Warcraft news. Where are we starting today, Matt?
Today, we're starting with the release date, which is the obvious place to start. It's certainly a little bit closer than I'd actually expected. And that threw some of our plans in the bin. But
yes, that definitely threw our plans in the bin. But yeah, so patch 9.0.5 is coming out next reset. So that is the 9th of March for the Americans, the 10th of March for Team Europe, and that's basically the situation. And it is a bit weird because, as an example, Dakor, TJ, who's working on some stuff for us at the minute, including some of our guides that will be coming out, at least according to him, we have a little bit of a situation where there's some things didn't feel mega done on the release candidate build from the PTR.
Yeah, I think specifically he was talking to me about the Valor per dungeon and the Valor per Mythic dungeon, and it's like, it harkens back to us writing guides for the launch of Shadowlands, where it more or less was the fact that when we were writing guides, like, we like to have final information so we can actually tell people what's going on. Yeah. And then, like, a single calculation of, like, how much you'll get from a dungeon can inform the entire pace of the patch that we can expect and how things are going to, like, end up going for the average player and, like, players of different types. But in this situation, it's like, he was saying, it doesn't feel final. It doesn't look final. He can't find information, but the patch is a release candidate and due next week. So
yeah, we've had again one of those situations where it's just, as people who, our job is to make as good content as we can for you that's actually useful and not misleading. It's bloody hard to do. It's a bit like, doing the Covenant guide and all of that stuff. Before Shadowlands. It's funny because our Covenant guide did super well in terms of views, and we did do it with the best information available at the time, but stuff was shifting and changing and just was literally not explained. So there's a little bit of that happening right now with that Valor per dungeon stuff, where, who knows? To be honest with you, the release candidate build could be hotfixed the night before it goes live, and that's when we could get our final value. I think it's pretty soon. Oh yeah, nice. Another bot wave coming.
Nice, cool.
I think it's a pretty surefire situation that Blizzard just knew they needed to get these Mythic Plus changes in. They have, I think, just went completely all out to make that happen. And that's why it looks like this accelerated process.
Yeah, it's that case where, like, the way I said all that was framed as super negatively, but that's kind of the impact on us and like how it seems that things aren't fully done. But
Yeah.
the alternative is, I mean, I expected this to be next week at the very, very earliest. And I mean, the patch is a week earlier than expected. I personally am like, I didn't expect this, so I'm a little bit thrown off. But I mean, ultimately, it's positive news. It is this patch, the next thing, a reason to come back and play Shadowlands if you were kind of thrown off by how Season 1 felt. Now it's like all of the system changes, and I guess some of like the Covenant and class balancing stuff that's sorely needed will actually be there. And that's, it's unanimously positive, realistically.
In terms of things to do, probably boop up our microphones.
Okay,
a
sure.
few people are saying in chat. Like I think this patch is unanimously good.
Mm-hmm.
It's that thing where something can be good and in the right direction, but if it's not as much as what people want, there still will be a bit of salt. And
Yes,
I think as we move forward in today's edition of the news and we see what's going on with, well, the Mythic plus Keystones, that's definitely a thing. But with Anima and just the way the VP system works, you can kind of see that we're directionally really good. But there are a few issues that people are definitely going to have. That said, and I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but the initial VP cap being that high, I think is vaguely actually quite good. It will at least mean that whenever people log into this patch, they'll have a big goal to hit, which for some people I think could kind of juice up their playtime. I wonder if Blizzard will actually look at that.
Without getting too far into it, we'll obviously get to that in a little bit. This is very much intended as a, hey, we'll fix all of Season 1's problems in the middle of Season 1, and then you can have the last probably like third to like half of the season be significantly better than if we went, we'll fix it in Season 2, which I think is good.
Yeah, and they've done that in a way 2 seasons in a row, because patch 8.3, Nyalotha, I mean, sort of thing, we did that with our guild at launch. So we got the worst version of patch 9.3, where you had no control over corruption and you just had all of that jazz that kind of sucked. But if you started playing patch 9.3 3 or 4 months into it and you went through all of it fresh then, you would have had a way better experience because Blizzard had made the progression systems work. They gave people more control. We see them doing that again now. I think the only thing I would say is I wish that they were a little bit better at seeing these problems ahead of time, because the problems of Season 1 of Shadowlands are completely obvious. And I think they would have been obvious in the I think they would have been obvious in the past as well. I think that is probably an expression of Shadowlands just having to get out there super quick. I think that's why, it's ended up being less than the sum of its parts in a few regards. You've got things like Torghast. You've got some of the tuning of Anima that we'll get into later where it just doesn't feel particularly great right now. And you can sort of tell it's because they set it live with the best numbers that they could possibly give those systems and as much time as they could give those systems while still having their Q4 2020 release date. So, an interesting situation. Overall good news. Pretty annoying for us making content that it's went down like this, but I think for chat, for the players, yes, better.
Yeah, better is I think exactly what we want out of everything that's going on. Yeah.
So that's basically your overall premise. Patch 9.0.5 is coming out on Tuesday or Wednesday, depending if you're US, it's Tuesday, EU, it's Wednesday. That's overall good news. That said, with that patch, there's a lot of details, so I think it's time to head into our first story.
Yes, so let us get into that. Next, we have the Valor cap starting at 5,000 Valor.
Yeah, and I think this is also just a good segue to talk about the overall Valor point system now that it's a little bit more settled and we know what it's like. Other than specifically knowing what end-of-run dungeon Valor point values are going to be, which is kind of a pity, because I think that's a pretty big bit of information.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where if they don't... it's so interesting because it's the details like that that kind of mess with the entirety of the system. Like, if they get that, like, half the value it should be in order to try to drive playtime, then that'll just ruin the experience of most people trying to get back into it. Especially if this is supposed to feel like a revamp of Season 1, like oh hey, sorry about that, that was a trial run of Season 1, now we've got the real one, then you've got that situation where they need it to be fast enough that everyone can catch up to.
Yeah.
Because obviously, like, if you're not sure of how the gear works, because of everything from before this patch won't be upgradable through the Valor system, which means if you've got an item that's like, say you're running around with like a mid 200s quantum device, if you want to boot that up, you're going to have to go and get another one, which sucks real bad. But
Yes.
you're gonna have to kind of, unless you're currently BIS, which I know there are people who are there, but if you aren't BIS at the minute and you want to play, you will essentially be slowly replacing your gear with new versions of it that you can upgrade.
Yeah, that's definitely awkward. I think there's going to be some people who will see that and think, what? I have to regrind all of my gear? Seriously? But then there's people for whom they'll see that and they'll be like, oh, cool, there's a new system. All I ever wanted to do was a whole bunch of Mythic Plus dungeons. I can now do that, and I have a new thing to engage with. Now, I would wonder, is there any way it would make sense for Blizzard to, like, I don't know, pay a certain amount of Valor points, you apply an item to an existing bit of Season 1 gear, and it converts it into one that could be used with Valor points? I wonder if that's something people care about. And I'm totally not saying that because I've got an item level 183 quantum device that if I could in any way upgrade that to 226 using Valor points, I absolutely would. Please, Blizzard. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that seems to be one of the cases where there's a lot of reasons they could have said, okay, gear before this point doesn't work from a design perspective, from a kind of, well, we want people to start afresh, we want that stuff. But I think, to me, it kind of comes across as these items are fundamentally different, like on the back end.
Yeah.
Where it's the same case where, your PvP gear can be upgraded, your Covenant gear can be upgraded. There's probably a flag on those that they can't set live or alter, and they kind of have to...
Yeah.
I mean, as to why they couldn't figure out a way to do that, who knows? But realistically, I imagine it's a case of, we want this done now, so we'll have to do a little bit of dirty work, and people will, it might feel good to some people to go and target gear afresh. So it's like,
yeah, it's like it could work for me pretty well as somebody who has been entirely focused on raiding thus far, has basically not touched M+, bar like doing, was it +8 Sanguine Depths? We did a few of those. Those were fun hell runs. But yeah, for me, I can engage with this system in a way where it's like, cool, I've got my raid set. I can target some bits of gear for dungeons, go get them up really good. And yes, that'll be a pretty good flow for me. So it's kind of funny because this current Mythic Plus system, it's like, it's going to work better for us as raiders who could then dabble in to Mythic Plus, but may slightly annoy the existing Mythic Plus players who will maybe feel like their past efforts are a little bit devalued. Because it's like, yeah, you put in all this effort here, and now the new system is just so much better. Even though there is a gear acquisition problem that they're not going to be super thrilled about in some cases. So overall, it's kind of interesting. And basically, right, to get into the numbers, 5,000 is going to be the initial cap. So you log into your character, you'll be at 0 out of 5,000 Valor points. And that just means you can do callings, you can do Mythic Plus dungeons, till the cows come home. Then that 5,000 cap, 750 will be added to that every week. So just like how it currently works with conquest points, as an example, and that is the overall cap of your earnings. That's not the cap on how much your character can actually have on them. That's a maximum of 1,500. And I believe each upgrade costs 250 Valor points.
I believe that is what it currently is on PTR. Yes, and
Yes.
that is completely irrespective of item level or anything. It is just 250, 250, 250, which means in order to use your cap effectively, then what you're going to want to do there is get the item level at its highest point initially. Yeah. As opposed to what might feel good for farming something rare like the quantum device or a specific weapon, which is, blast +2s until you get it. But that'll be less effective with this sort of cap in place.
Yeah. Well, actually, I then even wonder, and this is something I don't know if we have in the docket, but the situation where if you fail the timer on a key, you'll actually get a second bit of loot, but the second bit of loot that you get is a lower item level. That system that they're adding in. So I then have to wonder if that is something that Blizzard have done, basically to say, always do the hardest M+ dungeon, because you'll get 2 bits of loot if you fail that timer. Now, the second bit of loot is a good bit lower in item level, but I think that would mean, speaking to your example there, if somebody is thinking, I'm going to go and farm a quantum device in +3s, where I really should be doing a +12, well, if the +12 is going to give you literally double the loot in terms of items, if you fail the key, then I wonder if that's a more effective farming strategy. Hard to say.
Yeah, almost certainly. It kind of reminds me of the lesson they learned from Torghast, where they're like, failed states feel bad if you're not rewarded for them in some capacity. So, I mean, if the entire point of having a gear reward system that can effectively scale, and then you're not using it scaling to any impact on the failure side, or sometimes on like the positive side, oh dear, sorry about that, that's like, they have so many ways to use all of the systems they've built, and now if they can actually use them to further player experience a little bit and actually have it's that case where how many tanks hold a key ransom.
Yeah,
because it's like, it's okay, you're going to do it my way, or I don't like this, I'm gone, and that ruins it. Now there's at least a reason. Obviously, I mean, it's still going to feel bad if you take 50 minutes to do a 20-minute key, but it so simply solves a massive problem that they've had for so long.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing overall, where once this happens, we are going to have a significantly more viable gearing system for all 3 major instanced forms of endgame World of Warcraft. And that's kind of insane to me, because at least for me as a player, I've felt like the game has been fighting with me for years. And yeah, I've made no secrets about this, as many of you are probably completely sick and tired of. But like, the more that Blizzard have tried to juice up the gearing and do all of that stuff, the more just frustrated I felt. Whereas with this, if it's just simple, for PvE, you get your gear, you then upgrade your gear, done. It just clicks with my head. It's like it sets the parameters within which I can actually succeed as a player. And that means I'm like, oh, cool, that's the rules of the game, and it seems like it's a fair game. Well, then that's a game that I'm going to play, because I can see how it could respect my time. And that's just the sort of situation where, even if it is balanced conservatively and VP gains are pretty low, as long as it feels like it's a fair game and you can't be screwed over, you can push through that and it can be okay. Versus some past systems where you could really feel like your time is being disrespected by the game, and you were really just pulling that fruit machine, pulling the slots. It's not going to feel like that. So overall, I'm feeling pretty good, pretty happy.
It's I think the way to think about this, or at least the way I'm kind of thinking about it here, is now you've got a staircase to climb, you've got a hill to climb, you've got a mountain to go up slowly but surely. We'll see what they have it for raid in 9.1, because obviously Ian hinted something, but I mean, in 8.3, corruptions was the lottery, it was the fruit machine, it was a treadmill, because you were just, here I am, I'm going along this, something maybe comes, but now they've went, oh yeah, sorry, there's supposed to be there's a journeys of like endpoints.
Yeah.
And now they actually have those.
Yeah, and for me that brings up 2 things. So I got lucky in that lottery that you just talked about. I got Echoing Void on like day 1. And I think after that I got Twisted Appendage on a weapon. And that was the weapon I basically was like happy to have in my character, playing a DH at the time. So that system went really good for me, and it still pissed me off. So there's that. And then the second thing is just like that ability to, get a bit of gear and be like, oh, cool, I can take this to the moon by just playing World of Warcraft, that I think is good. Now, there's one thing I'd say. I would like it if VP is something that I could maybe get as a raider in some sort of way. And I think that would get us on to some speculative talk about the next gearing system the World of Warcraft is going to have, which is whatever the hell they're doing for raiding in patch 9.1, where all we know right now is Ian has sat down and he's just said, Raiders, we know you're not enthused about the gearing right now. We're working on it. It's going to be themed after domination magic. So it's like, is that going to be Crucible of Storms gear where, you know, it just has some cool stuff on it and that's why raid gear is best in raid? Or is it going to be some sort of situation where we get a currency and, you know, we basically have like a minor version of corruptions, but with a currency system where we earn that currency from raid? I wonder. Now, a large part of me just does think, instead of doing these big, like, per patch gearing systems, like, you know, corruption gear or domination gear, would it not be easier just to throw VP on raid gearing and just be like, this is how we do gearing this expansion. Done. Wash our hands of it. Get back into making content, because that's what everyone, you want content, I want content, Matt wants content, we all just want content. Not endlessly being the system's treadmill. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think they have grander plans than VP for raid. I think the fact that raiding is obviously what sets them aside is PvP and N+. You log in any night of the week, or you know, I guess with like some rated teams and with N+ groups, it does matter who's online. But generally speaking, you can log in, you can go do it, and there's always been like a case of there's a reward for that. And I don't see them doing something similar for raid. I don't see them going, okay, raiding is now an activity that you'll do all the time, which makes me think they're going to go with something very different rather than this like really segmented every couple steps treadmill. I imagine they'll go with something a little bit more unique, because the domination stuff is. I'm even thinking of the secret for the mount that felt really kind of cool. The new one, I can't remember what it's called, the Shade Seeker or whatever it was, with the you go and forge it with all that domination magic. But the idea of doing that, but for your raid weaponry, because you're sitting there, you're going to your raid, you're getting this big stuff, and it needs to feel big, but also instead of homogenizing all the systems together, can they make each raid and the gearing system around that feel special? Like you remember specific bits of gear you got in raiding in the past, in your Ulduars and stuff like that. You remember those bits of gear. How can they do that for raid? And I think what you said about having a currency with, it's combining the kind of idea of legendaries where you're making them and upgrading them yourself. They can combine the Crucible of Storms style, like super cool effects, the corruption style effects. So if they can actually get that targeted, they'll solve all of these problems with raiding at once and have it feel distinct from the likes of the Mythic Plus and PvP ground. So I think
two things. Yes. Thing one, we got to crank the gain on that mic.
Okay, sure.
People are saying it's about talking into the mic. It's not. Yeah. We actually have very similar position mics. This is a shotgun mic. It is not one that it's not like the Blue Yeti we've got over there. So that's thing number one. Hopefully that should be a bit louder. Thing number two, then, what you're, I think, really getting at is something that I remember hearing from someone in the know. It was not from Blizzard, but it was from someone in the know who was talking about Blizzard marketing and how Blizzard actually wanted to frame World of Warcraft towards its players. And I think this happened in BFA, where Blizzard basically had an initiative to stop calling patches by their actual version numbers. So, it's not patch 9.1, even though us players, we call it patch 9.1. No, for Blizzard, it's patch, it's not even patch. It's just World of Warcraft Shadowlands update, Chains of Domination. And I think that is because they saw how well Argus did. I forget what it was called, Fires of... Whatever the Argus patch was called, they really treated it like this mini expansion. And then when you moved in, what did you see? Well, you saw, it wasn't patch 8.1, it was, Tides of Vengeance, Rise of Ashara, N'Zoth's here, I guess. I've forgotten his patch.
Visions of N'Zoth.
Visions of N'Zoth, yes. One of the worst patches we've had. The raid was decent, and Horrific Visions were awesome, but that's kind of besides the point. Blizzard have basically worked out that your average Joe is not going to see World of Warcraft patch 9.1 new features and think, oh boy, howdy, let's go. No, they want it to feel like World of Warcraft Chains of Domination, like a mini expansion, because imagine you're a marketer and, your job is to market patch 9.1 versus your job is to market Chains of Domination. You can market something like Chains of Domination a lot more. And what that brings me on to is basically the way that you talked about that system. Where is it that Blizzard just wants to get their system for gearing or whatever, it just exists for the whole expansion? Or would Blizzard rather new raid, domination magic theme, domination gear, where it feels like a big title feature of a major title update to the game? And I think that's the sort of thing that is, in a way, it's good for the game because it helps to combat the seasonality problem. And this is something we talked about in the last episode. If you watched our most recent WoW News episode as well, World of Warcraft lost 41% of its players in 2 months. And that's because it's highly seasonal. People come in for that expansion. And I think what they really want to do is have each one of those patches be one of those big sort of high, seasonality moments, more so than in the past. So I think that's why you're pretty much bang on the money as to how Blizzard would want to theme a new gearing system, even though as perhaps players who, for the two of us anyway, and probably loads of you, we're players, we know we're playing World of Warcraft, we know we want to stick with it, that doesn't matter too much to us, but I think for a bunch of the less engaged audience, I think Blizzard knows that will work better. My worry then, and this does get us a little bit away from the news, but I think to a topic that's very close to everybody's hearts, Final Fantasy XIV, they added player housing. That's just a feature in the game that's, forever. There's a farming whatever the new system is in the new expansion. It's like that, what is it? There's some feature that's like casual-ish content in the new expansion. And it's just a sort of thing where it's like, that is an addition that's made to the game and it just sticks in the game. So imagine if garrisons were not garrisons and were player housing. And I would be able to unlock Shadowlands-y things for my player house now in the Shadowlands expansion. Well, then that system would have expanded World of Warcraft to make it bigger and better in a way where that expansion's big major update would actually really stand to the game right now. Instead of just, garrisons, I guess I can go back there to get a transmog set. Same goes for our class order halls. I mean, imagine if the class order halls were actually still relevant to us. I mean, if the next WoW expansion came out and Blizzard actually, as a major thing, said, hey, your class order hall, that's actually a bit of your base now. And whenever you make a new character, and that character, say a hunter, that character starts off in your class order hall. I mean, man, people will be really into that. So for me, the worry is that if things are developed as, this is a build-around feature for this expansion only, and we throw it in the bin afterwards, which is how Blizzard design almost every feature they make now, I would then worry if we get to the stage where it's like, gearing systems only last for a patch, and then they're thrown in the bin, and there's a new fancy one. I would then wonder, would it not be easier just to keep the gearing very simple, and all of the effort that goes into trying to make that big, hyper-juice new gearing system, maybe that effort could go somewhere else. Because at least I'm in a situation where I'm a raider, I just want it plain and simple, and I would actually rather Blizzard spent less time working the content that I play the most, and more time working on content for a bunch of the casual player base, because a lot of that stuff is like Deaths of Chromie, or the Trials of Ascension, or all those things. They're really cool. So I guess thanks for sending me off on a big rant.
You're very welcome. Yeah, I completely agree. It's like, I think I touched on this last week where I was talking about how they don't design for the curve of incoming players to be smooth. They design for it to be spiky. And I think all of this stuff is relying on the marketing to just spike as high as humanly possible every single time. And getting mini expansions out of every patch is going to be very, very good for that. And I think it's kind of... It reminds me of how the whole Path of Exile thing is, where they said, let your players go, and they'll come back. I think they're kind of relying on that, especially for the raiders, I think, because the seasons are strong enough to bring people who really like to play the game gameplay-wise. They'll bring those back for sure, but Raiders might need a little bit more, and other players who aren't interested in the season will come back for Chains of Domination. And it's like, I think it's, what is it? How to put it? It's like Better the Devil You Know in terms of how they're directing everything, especially when it comes to how they'll, like, especially from like the guys at the top who want the money in. They'll be looking, they'll go, oh yeah, see the way since the dawn of time, we've had Spike, and, you know, up and up and up and up, and then, you know, Mist started to fall off, Warlords, bang, up, Legion, bang. I feel like all of, basically everything they've ever done has been in service of that.
I think in the modern era, yeah.
Yeah.
Because this is something we went into when I was doing the research for that last video, where, you know, I think the most important metric in this is, you know, it's not the spikiness of the curve, but it's the area under the curve. And the best way to make the area under the curve of the total amount of people who are playing World of Warcraft, the way to make the area under the curve bigger is not to make the spikes bigger. It's to lift up the troughs so they're not troughs anymore. And the really interesting thing is when we were looking through the data on WoW during its growth curve, you do not see that seasonality. Yeah. And Mists of Pandaria is the real mind blow, because MoP had its launch issues, people thinking, oh, Kung Fu Panda, blah, blah, blah. But the people who actually stuck in MoP, its numbers, I remember one of the patches actually went up. And it's really not until you get into Warlords of Draenor that the big spikiness starts to happen. And man, I wish we had the data for Battle for Azeroth, because that would have been terrifyingly spiky. I don't know about you guys or whatever, but I mean, I did not play a lot of BFA, even though you know, all of the incentives in the world are saying, Michael, play Battle for Azeroth. It's literally your job. And I was sitting there in a position where it's literally my job, and there's really not that much I want to do until we get into a guild and, you know, get ahead of the curve in Azoth, which was all very fun. So I guess moving on from that, we're talking about this spikiness and stuff, and, you know, one of the things I was talking about is that area under the curve. How do we make things less spiky? One of the ways to do that is to have good progression systems and things like that in the game. We've just covered the Valor point stuff, so I guess we can move on to the new thing. The new thing for Anima.
Yeah, very, very, very exciting. There's a brand new weekly source of Anima.
Yes, there is a brand new source of Anima each week, and it's one that is incredible, because if this discussion is like, I don't know, if the discussion is a barrel that's full of holes and it's leaking everywhere, because what is on this one Wowhead page leads to 700 million discussions. It's kind of incredible. Now, if you want the skinny, the news, basically, if you are capped on souls, if you're capped on souls in your covenant, which most people are, we're going to go back, you're going to hand that quest in, and now you're going to get 500 Anima. And in a way, this could be quite convenient for many players, because you could go, you could get your souls from the Maw. That's not going to take you too long, 2 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. And then bam, you get 500 Anima. Guess what that does? That's going to put you halfway through your other weekly quest. Then you'll only need 500 Anima to complete that weekly. Which is certainly going to help. I mean, that's killing a few raid bosses or whatever. And then, if you are capped out on renown, because we may as well do this other news story as well at the same time, if you're capped out on renown, then the quest will give you 1,500 gold. So it's quite funny, because what's basically happened is their currencies run into a wall, renown caps, so they're just going to funnel you gold after that. Which, hey, 1,500 gold for completing my Anima weekly, which I'm going to do anyway because I'm clearing the raid. Cool. Fair enough. It is a little bit awkward, though.
Yeah, 1,500 gold is, I mean, the callings give you roughly that on average. I think the epic callings give you significantly more than that, which are rolling in every day. So it feels literally like they had nothing better, which is really annoying because, you know, imagine that was pick Valor or Conquest for that week, pick pick honor, something like anything would have been, I think, better than this. But it just shows like they don't want to impact the economy too hard.
Yeah.
1,500 gold doesn't pay for your consumables half the time for that week. Like it's certainly not ideal.
Yeah, and it does touch on that thing that we've had discussions of, where basically the currencies are really weird and renown is really weird. And the chat that we had, which I guess we'll sort of redo now because I think it's a really good one. Renown is tied to a bunch of things. And I think a lot of the casual player base have seen the renown system and they've thought, 2 a week? Really? Where's my agency in this player agency expansion? And I think that's meant that they've bounced off because they can't sit down and really get immersed in the World of Warcraft doing a campaign because they've seen that renown gate. And it's like, as you go through that renown, you don't get enough of the other currencies in the game to actually get loads, many of those rewards. And I don't know if it was a Reddit post or whatever, but whatever it was, it came to the person worked out getting like every current Anima thing, like the cosmetics and all of that stuff from all the different covenants. And it basically was like 660 something days of like pretty involved while playing. And I just thought that was like, whoa, interesting. These currencies are oddly balanced. And the discussion that we had basically boiled down to, kind of just slap on, oh dear, Shadowlands has got to release in 15 minutes. We have to slap some Anima values on. Which is what it was like, monitoring the beta of, of this expansion in its sort of final periods. It was very hard to know what values were actually true. So it's a weird thing with Anima, where people, they're going up renown, but they're not really getting enough Anima to purchase things that they want. But then if they want that Anima, well, if you are a casual player, and that is surely the person that the Anima grind, so making your Sanctum better, unlocking more of your farming minigame, getting new mounts, that's the stuff that those casual players love because they're growing their character in a way that's visual and that they care about. But for those people, the only content they can regularly do is world quests. So then it's like, you're doing all these world quests for Anima, and that gets you some Anima, but you complete the calling, and the bloody calling doesn't give you Anima. And I remember that was really weird to me. Because I totally felt like completing a calling is something that should have got me Anima, but it didn't. So I thought that was a really, really bizarre thing. And then the other side of that, and this is you brought this up to me, this is not my idea, but it's basically that there's the rate at which you earn Anima, and it goes like this. And then, boom, souls. You get souls so much faster that you can earn the Anima to get the Covenant Sanctum upgrades that you want. Which is why, if you're Captain Souls, they'll give you more Anima. So it's obviously the thing where the soul system has set an expectation that you should always be able to use the souls that you earn by doing the weekly to upgrade your Covenant Sanctum. But Anima is not at all balanced like that. And Blizzard actually said that Anima was balanced as an expansion-wide progression thing. BlizzCon.
Maybe expansion wide's a little bit much, as you said. Was it 600 something days it would take to get everything for all of that? But I think that's the case where honestly the Anima drought was too real.
Yeah,
I think that's actually kind of what maybe happened to them, where they're like, okay, well, how do we get this Anima drought that everyone's experiencing, and then mesh that with the fact that the Anima is this currency that we're going to have our players all do and all hunt for. So it's the case where I think they erred on the side of caution, balancing it far too low. Because that thing about the souls, I went off on it a couple times recently. It's just, I feel like Blizzard are telling me up front, oh hey, yeah, you're getting 15 souls a week, you're getting 20 souls a week. To spend those, you need to be doing every world quest on the map. And sure, you get 1,000 or so from raiding, but if you're only doing your raid, then you'll get 1,000 or so.
And not in the past. Back when it was only 35 Anima per boss.
And that's the thing that was particularly frustrating, because I think I'm getting less Anima now that I'm raid logging than I was before in total, because I was incentivized. I didn't enjoy it, but what I was doing was going to, I was logging in an hour or two before raid, I was going and getting 1,000 Anima for my renown, and then going to raid, and then getting whatever after that. But it's like my rate of Anima is actually slowed down now, which is kind of a weird side effect of a couple of different things. But on the Anima front, it's just, they need to add a 0 to numbers, I think. Maybe not a 0, but they need
a bit higher overall.
They need to like double or triple general Anima gain from all sources, maybe even world quests. But it's certainly a completely missed opportunity on making people want to go get those cosmetics.
Yes.
Because I've immediately I have the full silver set, the full aspirant set, I think, from the Kyrians, and it's nice. The golden set is a little bit nicer, but I know how much that's going to cost me. I know how much time that's going to cost. I'm like, no.
Yeah, and for you to get that piece of armor, you would then have to set back your Covenant Sanctum upgrades by a whole bunch, and you enjoy the Trial of Ascension or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So then that screws you over. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. If I was to overall surmise this, to draw the Anima drought section to a close, I think Blizzard balanced this based on somebody who is doing whatever weekly bonus exists, and also doing the the Epic Battleground and normal Battleground, weekly quests, as well as the 2 dungeon weekly quests, and the regular world quest, or, Anima weekly quests, and, doing all of that content. So I think they balance that system for people who are dabbling in everything and maxing out what they could get, because I think a bunch of the WoW devs, if they maybe had more time to play the game and were deving all the time, are probably the types of players who would rather exhaustively play the game. So maybe they've assumed that a whole bunch of people do that as well. So we've kind of had this system balanced for one type of player, when really its target audience is a bit of a different type of player. For moving on, one thing, we do have a super chat from Jay-Z. Apparently Jay-Z is in the chat. It's definitely that one. Sorry, that super chat was ages ago. I'm just getting to it now, which will give us a bit of a fun one. Where is the source of the Dreadlords in the new zone? So that's one thing. The other thing is, I forgot to tell you about this. Someone in chat reminded me. Thanks. Classic Plus. Classic Plus might actually happen. So I think we're going to have to talk about that. Because as somebody who's playing Modern and does not have the time for Classic, the idea of Classic Plus is the one thing that could actually get me in there in a decently big way. First, though, to cover the super chat from Mr. Jay-Z himself, where is the source of the Dreadlords in the new zone? And the answer to your super chat is pretty simple. You'll probably find out on the live servers in 2-ish months. You might find out from data mining within 1 calendar month from hearing this right now. Because if patch 9.0.5 is going to be off the PTR, Blizzard did say at BlizzCon the 9.1 will follow up in the PTR pretty damn soon. So expect that. As for the source of the Dreadlords, that is a bit of a funny one. If I try to put my lore cap on for a second, they're Dreadlords, according to the Q&As. They're not like mini Denathriuses. They're not Venthyr. They're actual Dreadlords. Now that's going to mean that some cosmic shenanigans, some cosmic tomfoolery is going on that's actually got those Dreadlords into this plane of the Shadowlands. Now that opens up a whole can of worms. Did those Dreadlords, are those Dreadlords that died? And then they've went to the pocket dimension of the Shadowlands that is where Dreadlords go. Because if it turns out that Korthia is the bit where Dreadlords go, just like how maybe the Drust have got where the Drust go, then that's pretty interesting. Because the Dreadlords are these sort of vampiric, very, very, very knowledgeable, deeply ancient, group where, we have a situation right now where the Dreadlords basically know exactly what's going on with everything. There's an old God Whisperer that I think is a bit reinterpreted now. I'll get to that in a future video. So the thing is that Illidan, in the Illidan novel, completely destroyed their homeworld. And I really got the vibe that the destruction of their archives was like, the burning of the Library of Alexandria, right? This just event that, at least in its place in the WoW canon, is this just tremendous and kind of tragic loss of knowledge that our allies, did, in a way, right? Because Illidan was kind of fighting for the good cause. Illidan did that, but it's like, at what cost? What knowledge have we lost? Steve Denuser told me that the grimoire of the Shadowlands book that's coming up, that has extra cosmic knowledge. Now, the thing is, the Dreadlords are beings that have infiltrated the various different cosmic forces. They've definitely infiltrated light. They're heavily involved in death, as we know, through Denathrius. They obviously completely ran rings around Sargeras. I mean, they totally screwed him up. So it's big, because this could be us getting some of that Dreadlord knowledge, and it'll be us seeing these Dreadlords in the new context of World of Warcraft expanding into the cosmos, and this new era of the lore. Now, some people may say retcon, some people may say reinterpretation, reimagining. I think some of that's going on. The Dreadlord's role that they play in the game right now, I think is 100% not what they were in Warcraft 3. But I think the role they're going to serve in the game in the future now is pretty neat. As far as a bunch of cosmic villains go, I think the Dreadlords, and maybe if the brokers are playing a foil to them, I think that would actually be pretty cool.
Yeah, and there's something that I just kind of thought of when you're talking about Korthia and exactly what their relationship with death is. So, Nathrezah was blown up, basically, by portal magic, and most of the Dreadlords were there. If they're allied with death, where that wasn't the end of them, they're going to be somewhere in the Shadowlands, and if they know what the Shadowlands is, like, obviously, if they were, we can assume if they were fully turned demon, they would maybe go to the Nether, but that doesn't seem like the case for all of them. Especially if they're smart, they will have kept enough so free of Fel that they could just, oh no, I've died, I'm gone, oh, I'm not going to report to my leader. That kind of thing.
And whenever they die, they're going to get the VIP package whenever they land in the Shadowlands. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's Korthia. As well, we were told that Korthia is this ancient, kind of like a bit lost and weird realm of the Shadowlands that's being pulled in by the jailer. Does that actually mean that Korthia is, like, some special place? Is it maybe the case that Dreadlords have been going there plotting and scheming for a while? I mean, could it even be the case that the reason why the jailer was so happy to let Denathrius go is that maybe the jailer realized that Sire Denathrius was actually running a bunch of stuff on the side with his Dreadlords that the jailer maybe didn't know about? Could be the case. Who knows? That is getting a little bit into the wild speculation, but
yeah, I can't imagine that. Yeah, I can't imagine that Korthia is going to be this like completely Dreadlord ruled area. But I mean, if it's lost, if it's uncharted waters for even the denizens of the Shadowlands, they are likely going to be, they'll have little pockets. I mean, if they were leaving stuff lying around Revendreth that talked about the true plans, I mean, there'll at least be some hidden stuff going on that we can find.
Yeah. So Jay-Z, the rapper who was in our chat, thank you for the super chat. Actually, one thing we're going to be doing in the future is a kind of like control the show segment where, via super chats and patrons and stuff, we'll pretty much be doing like segments like this. They're based on those. So that's something we'll probably do if there's a few super chats left over as we're going through the news. We'll do a little bit of a control the show segment after a few news stories have been covered. So, Jay-Z, thank you for the super chat. I think that was actually a really fun discussion you got us into.
It was great. Yep, it was fantastic.
And I think that means... so Sephrix says, what is a super chat? Basically, it's the, like, donation that YouTube... It's basically like a Twitch donation, but it's actually on YouTube. It's supported by Google. You don't have to do it with plugins and stuff. Your chat's like highlighted and stuff. Eventually we'll be able to like automatically have it pop up on the screen, and if you'd like to support us, and I guess instead of just being a donation, you can also attach a message to that, which for a control the show segment means you can choose the topics and stuff. So that's that, and super chats are awesome and big. Appreciate.
Let's continue then, I suppose. So where were we going next?
When should we do Classic Plus?
I guess we've kind of blown the lid off that, so we might as well get around to it.
Let's talk about Classic Plus. Classic Plus is a pretty wild idea, and it's one that I think essentially comes from old school RuneScape. In old school RuneScape, now I played RuneScape 2007, a good amount of time, and the way that worked is they changed RuneScape over time to the point where the RuneScape players were like, guys, we seriously like the old version more. So Jagex actually listened to their community. They did old school RuneScape, and then I believe a big community poll was held, which basically said, do we keep old school RuneScape as old school RuneScape as it was and don't change it? Or do we continue development of old school RuneScape with a development philosophy that is very much rooted in what made old school RuneScape what it was? So what has essentially happened is Blizzard have sent out surveys to players, and you can probably, I mean, if you do a Google
No problem.
So Blizzard basically, they did these surveys, and through those surveys, we basically learned the Classic Plus is something that Blizzard is actually considering doing. Now, you may think this is, just a survey, whatever. No, I mean, Classic TBC. That is something that we initially found out about via surveys that Blizzard put into people's email addresses. The way that Blizzard are handling advancing from Classic into Classic TBC, that is also something that's, that we found out via survey. And here is the big survey that people are talking about. And I think one of those pages anyway is covering the idea of Classic Plus, where basically, so these servers could have changes that dramatically change aspects of the game experience and would make it different from what the original World of Warcraft experience was like. Now, they give examples of layering for high pop servers, changes to the PvP honor system, stuff like that. Now, it's hard to say how far they would go. And there's certainly an argument to be said that, stats and ratings only scale so much before the end game breaks. So if they were to do a Classic Plus that involved new raid tiers, I don't know how they could stretch that out into the future for long enough. However, I think there is a humongous opportunity here for Blizzard to capitalize on what I think is the more unique essence of Classic, and that is that Classic is so Wild West in so many ways, and I think a bit more player-driven, that a Classic Plus system that works could add an element of sandbox into the game. Like changes to the PvP honor system. Now, you could just do that in a way where some of the, welfare grinding of it goes away and it feels more player friendly or whatever. They could just do something small like that. Or they could work in world PvP to the point where like world PvP on a server is something that feels more sandboxy. And who knows what that is? I mean, old school RuneScape has got Wildy, there's nullsec areas in EVE Online. I don't know what they would do. But there's a chance I think they could make Classic actually more sandboxy, and if they did that, they could get so much more content and make that so much more rich and vibrant. I mean, what if they made what if they even made like a player housing system in Classic that felt all janky and old, that literally would be like the player housing system that we're almost entirely sure they were prototyping for and around the Classic era? What if they actually took some of those weird old things and they banged them in there just to see what it's like? Who knows? Who the hell knows? I certainly don't. But if there was just, for me, that understanding that I could go into this old version of WoW, but it would actually grow in interesting ways, I'd be totally down for that. Totally.
That would be like, it would be making such incredible use of the popularity of Classic and everything else that it kind of feels like a no-brainer. But I think based on how that's worded, with the laying for high populations, changes to the PvP honor system, etc., I actually think this is them quietly, because there wasn't, as far as I could see, a huge pushback from the announcement of TBC Classic that they were going to make changes.
Yeah.
I think that this is more intended to be, we're going to mirror those changes to Classic, so then the experience is actually better now that we're free of the no changes people. It's interesting because I feel like the further we get into the like TBC and Wrath kind of stuff, more players will be less expecting a solved game, and there's a lot more freedom there. So I think this might be them mirroring that back now that the people who have had the solved game experience are more or less through with it. Yeah, I would love for this to be something a little bit more than that, but I think it is really, it's really holding on hope that it'll be massive changes. I mean, obviously small system changes like the World PP can go a huge way, but I think you brought up at the very start new raid tiers. I cannot imagine them devoting the resources to that. Which is a shame.
Actually, even that is a part of why I say it should be done. Actually, because Molten Core. Now look, Molten Core. I mean, I think Preach actually did a video on this recently. It's like near the bottom of his raid list because yeah, it was the first raid they ever did, but it did generate a lot of content, a lot of game time, and Molten Core was literally banged together in a week. Now this is the thing: if you're making new stuff for WoW Classic, it's way easier to make. Now you're probably going to have to deal with spaghetti code, files and workflows that feel absolutely ancient to engage with as developers. So there's going to be a bunch of issues there. But I think that fundamentally developing new content for a WoW Classic Plus is going to be so much easier. And I just think the way that game is set up and the expectations the Classic players seem to have, the things they seem to be okay with and enjoy, I think that, seriously could open us up for an incredible experience. And I would say that it would not take a lot of resources to make that happen. It basically could be a third WoW product if done right. And thinking about how little it would cost to do an experiment like that, who knows? It would be tricky. You've got problems like PvP has so much potential in an older version of Azeroth, but how do you get server balance right? Do you make some weird sort of server where, initially there's only 10,000 slots for each faction, and they slowly increase those over time in order to load balance? Who the hell knows, really? But I just think there is some way of spinning up a new Classic Plus server that could just be absolute. The way that people have got back into old school RuneScape, and they have stuck with old school RuneScape for so long. Jagex as a company, it's getting, investment, acquisition. It is doing biz dev to the moon. And I get the impression a bunch of that is built off old school RuneScape, completely just doing gangbusters for them.
Yeah, I think that's I do tend to get caught up a little what Blizzard won't do as opposed to what they very much could do. And the idea of, reminding me that Molten Core was done in a week, it's like, yeah, if to expand on, if they don't make it purely a sandbox for players, if they also make it a sandbox for whoever they have kicking around working on that, then I think the idea of it being a third product would actually be really, really interesting. It's just a matter of can they let go of any standards they personally hold to okay, we'll need to totally okay this raid. If they can get over all of those people who expect the solved game that they want to, revisit, if they can break through and sell the idea, then it is obviously the idea of obviously you wouldn't want to do a raid in a week because MC is not a good raid.
No.
And I imagine that week wasn't a 40-hour work week from a couple of people. I believe that was basically all hands on deck. Absolute crunch nightmare mode. But it's it's horrible to get anyone's hopes up, but the idea of just hey, yeah, it's been 2 months, here's a new raid we banged out. It's we game jammed this raid basically.
And a lot of people might think, but where's the content? Well, look, what is the next expansion? It's going to the Burning Crusade. So the storylines of Azeroth, in so many ways, they didn't progress until Cataclysm happened. And that means you could easily do... imagine the amount of money that Blizzard would make if they got up at a BlizzCon, they announced Classic Plus, and they said, World of Warcraft, Classic Plus, the Pirates of Booty Bay. And it turns out that is a micro expansion to WoW Classic where there is more Booty Bay content. Maybe it ties into the other Goblin cartels. They can get a new piratey themed raid that feels really WoW Classic. And there you go. You have just went, and it's almost like the Hearthstone approach of taking a bit of old school World of Warcraft and actually advancing it a little bit. And you could do that in a really cool way. Because imagine if they introduced the island of Kazan as a new zone to go to. You could actually go to a Kazan in the busted, janky WoW Classic art that would actually be that area before we saw it in Cataclysm. And you could actually lean on the fact that this is the past in really cool ways to build out Azeroth. Right now they're doing that in books like Exploring Eastern Kingdoms, but they could do that in a WoW Classic. just think of the amount of cool plot lines and cool things going on in the world of original Azeroth that you could just expand. And I imagine expand in a way that is far cheaper than any of that in the current game right now. Because if you're making that content in the game right now, you're like, well, why are we doing a pirate thing when we're in the Shadowlands? That makes absolutely no sense. Why would we ever put the WoW modern development team onto making a cool pirate mini thing when they could be working in the new patch content in the Shadowlands? Whereas it makes complete sense in something like Classic Plus. So I think that's mostly where to leave it. And if anyone's going to talk about resources, this is Blizzard, this is World of Warcraft, this is Activision Blizzard, this is their big product alongside Call of Duty. And as we covered last week, Call of Duty has got Infinity Ward, Sledgehammer, Treyarch, Raven, and one other studio. I've forgotten their name.
Is it Raven, does it?
I think Raven does a bunch of the porting and stuff, maybe.
Oh, yeah. No,
I think they did the campaign of Cod Blops Cow.
Yeah, it's hard to say without actually reading the credits because there's so goddamn many of them.
But point basically is the other big Activision Blizzard franchise has got 6 studios. Now I think 3 of those are only 3 of those are lead development studios, but they've got that. And then they've got the other studios. And then they've got the legions and legions of outsourcing studios that are actually making most of the assets probably. I mean, man. Bobby, give Jab the beans. Jab, give Ian and his mates the beans. Give the beans to the employees and make cool stuff. And of course, there's also the thing that always comes up here where, the place where Blizzard is sucks. I've been to Irvine. Now, no offense to anyone at Blizzard or anything like that. If I had to live in Irvine, all I could see in my future is depression and sadness. Now there are parts of LA that are actually quite nice that I've only found out about via friends that live there and can actually be like, oh no, here's the cool flower bit and mountains and stuff, and that's all sweet. But it's that thing where it's so goddamn expensive. For the cost of one developer living there, I don't know, how many could you have in Belfast?
Ooh.
How many could you have in Warsaw? How many could you have in some other part of the world? So I'm just thinking hey, Blizz, why don't you open a studio in another country that's cheaper and actually start... Come on.
Yeah, I mean...
Riot's finally realized there was an S after games in their company name, and they're going to be going giga. It's time for you guys to do it too.
Yeah, no, I mean, Riot are involved with Hypixel.
Yeah, that's a perfect one. Riot acquired Hypixel. You maybe have heard of the game Hytale. It got 20-something, probably 100-something million views on its trailer. It's kind of a Minecraft-like game, I guess. But they're up in Derry. They got acquired by Riot. So now, in a way, Riot's got its fingers in the Northern Ireland pie. And, I mean, I think they're a very remote team anyway, but it's if you were to compare the cost of a bunch of developers in Northern Ireland versus a bunch of developers in Irvine... It's going to be a lot cheaper over here. So that's honestly getting a bit off the point, but it is just that whole thing of, hey, Blizz, I mean, surely you guys could invest more and, you could probably do it in countries where it costs a lot less. Would they? I mean, I think we basically know the France office is on the way out. But that said, you probably wouldn't start an office in France if you were starting one. Because any big company is going to want to go to a region that's got good incentives, that's got labor relations laws that are in the company's favor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a bunch of countries where I mean, it could totally fit the bill. So, Classic Plus, let's make it happen. Also, super chat from Jay-Z confirming that he is in fact not the rapper. Thank you for the super chat. I had a suspicion it wasn't Jay-Z, to be honest, but there you go.
What made you say that? I mean, actually, with the sheer amount of celebrity kind of influence in World of Warcraft over the years, I mean, that would be a bit weird for a new ad campaign. World of Warcraft Shadowlands with Jay-Z wouldn't quite be the same as Mr. T or Vin Diesel. But
everyone is horny for Henry Cavill because of The Witcher.
Yep.
And he is a WoW man. So they could probably do that. And yeah, it would probably work. So, one of the things in the title of this stream is Mythic Plus drama.
Oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
I think it's time to cover the Mythic Plus drama.
Yes.
And while Matt is bringing up Mythic Plus drama, we got 100 dislikes from a bot that was also spamming cock in chat for half an hour. That was very fun. So if you would like to, in Starship Trooper style, do your part, smash that like button, defeat the bots, or I suppose defeat the bugs if we're, all Starship Troopers on it. Would appreciate it. Thanks. Because if that ratio ain't okay, then I was going to say Blizzard crushes the video. Blizzard doesn't do that. YouTube crushes the video. So let's get on to this. Matt, could you give me a quick once-over of what's going on, then we can get into the analysis, because this is an interesting one.
Yes, so essentially your keystones that are left in your bag, because you don't have time to do them, or kind of couldn't really be bothered, they'll start degrading now. So they're reverting the Shadowlands formula. So it is the BFA formula, which is if you don't complete a 15 keystone every other week, it goes down to a 13 after 2 weeks. That means if you're one of those people who has a lot of alts and you're chilling, you're like, I'll do that. It's not a good week. It's maybe 2 bad weeks in a row for my tanks I don't like. I don't know. You play a warrior, you don't like necrotic. Like, okay, I'll leave it out for a bit. Or even if you don't have time, well, too bad. You're going to be set back a little bit. And that's,
Now the thing is, what if you are a player, and I think this is what Blizzard are thinking. And this is actually because I saw a Wowhead comment, I think it was on this post, and it was somebody who didn't know that you can downgrade your key. And I have a suspicion that Blizzard actually, that they may have thought, because somebody in those comments basically said, I was stuck with this key for 4 weeks, or with keys for 4 weeks that I could not complete. And that's obviously an issue. Now, to those of us who are more clued into the game, we know that you can go in and you can just go in, go out, and you can manually degrade your key. A lot of people have been asking for more control over their keys, which could solve things like this. So I have to wonder, whenever Blizzard go through and, whenever Blizz actually looks at the, the overall player data, do they see loads of people that get up to these keys and then they just kind of stop because they've hit a wall? Because now the situation is that player, the next week, if they don't time their key, then it's going to decrease more. So do you think that could be what Blizzard are doing?
Okay, so I kind of do think that's some of it. Some of it is that for sure. It's because it is like, if you think about it from the user experience kind of angle, manually depleting the key feels really stupid and wrong, because you're essentially failing it on purpose.
Yes, a game, it should never be like that. That's the right thing to do.
Yeah, so I really wish they would give some sort of explanation for this, that we can kind of understand the thought process. That's probably some of it. Although it's really hard to say, but it just feels like the problem is that you don't have enough control over your keystone. And they're going, okay, we'll just wrestle it off you. When, I'm thinking, if they're not trying to force people into lower keystones that they can't do, then the simpler one, and obviously this is asking them for implementations of stuff, but why can't you put your keystone into the slot and then just go from +2 to the max level of the key? That would be significantly better, I think, for most situations for people. Yeah,
why is there not a broker character? You just get, you go to the broker and you can do fun, interesting things with your key. Maybe, I'm not, and I guess neither of us are big Mythic Plus first players. We are rating players. But something like that, to me, just seems to make a lot of sense. And it seems like that is a system we should have, and not really something like this, where what's made people a bit pissed is it's just that thing. If you don't log in and do, those keys in your characters, they're just going to degrade and fall down over time. So you're just going to feel like it's all slipping through your fingers. And I think that is getting us a bit closer to that feeling of weekly chores and mandatory things like, oh, I should really go and do this key because, I don't want it to fall over. And that's just some of that mandatory feeling content that I think people don't like. But I also think this doesn't matter too much. For most people. It barely matters, actually.
Absolutely not.
How many people are really doing all of that on all of their alts?
Yeah, and you can just do someone else's key and you're fine. It's just like, I guess it could be frustrating if you get a really nice key, especially if you're up in the 20 or at the 15 and you're thinking, okay, well, I want to get my 226 gear from this, and I want to do this specific dungeon, and then you log in and it's a week lower, that would be like,
Yeah, it's like it feels minorly bad.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually getting at something that is a source of some community, you could even say drama, and that is people being displeased at a change based on principle, and then the people who modulate that through the actual real-world impact of that change. This is a situation where I think it's a bit of a dumb solution to a problem that shouldn't exist. So to me, I'm like, well, I've lost a little bit of faith because this seems like a bit silly. But for a lot of other people, they're going to say, well, this is just a band-aid solution and it basically doesn't matter anyway. So, why would we really worry? To that, I'd then say, well, it's the thinking behind the thing that's maybe the issue, and maybe we should have a way to modify our keys, and that'll make the game better. So I think it's that thing of fundamentally, like, you know, stepping back and really trying to almost not react to things like this on a point of principle and only to think about outcome. But I think that really does miss so much because it's the principles that I think really do matter. And I think that's why this is something that's really resonated with a bunch of the Mythic Plus community, where it's the principle they don't like.
Yeah, I mean, it's a case of if you scroll down here for the through the comments, the vast majority of it is just no one asked for this. Why? Why have we done this? It was fine before. What's gone wrong? And I think it is just like, it feels like tinkering that, you know, I guess it's a matter of they probably don't want to tell us why, because it's a data-driven change. That's what I imagine. So it's like every other change they make, they kind of go, okay, so here, you know, we're changing, obviously not specifics, but hey, we're doing a passive of these Coven ability tunings, and then, you know, developers asked about it, go, yeah, it's for this and this and this and this and this. Here's all stuff, but if this one's like, hello, here's a change, no comment, kind of implies that it's like it's a bit of bitter medicine for the game, and the community's going like, get away.
This reminds me of something. I'll keep this brief. Don't worry, I will keep this bit brief, but I think it is important. It reminds me of a story we covered last year in the news channel. And it was basically, there was somebody who was a producer at DICE, who are the Battlefield studio, who was responding to a change that to the Battlefield community was highly, highly controversial. They basically rebalanced all of the guns in order to change the time to kill. So how many shots it actually takes to kill a bad guy. Now, that's because the newest, or Battlefield 5, had a very low time to kill. So if you were a really good Battlefield player, you could slay the hell out of people. But if you were a noob, and the time to kill is really fast in the game, then, oh dear, you spawn, you die. You are not happy, you leave the game. The churn rate goes up. And this producer at DICE, ex-producer at DICE, basically said, listen, this is the type of hyper data-driven change that a developer can make, and basically won't really tell you too much about their reasoning. And what will happen is they'll make that change, they will wait X amount of months, and they will see how it panned out. And I think that's just a really good example, because the vocal online community was absolutely pissed. I would say probably high 80% of them did not like the change that DICE were making. Yet, DICE decided to make that change based on the numbers that they have, which is just numbers that we cannot get access to.
Yeah, I mean, didn't they revert that later? Was it that they reverted a little bit later? Partial? Yeah.
Partial.
So I think that kind of tells it was maybe they made the right move, but it was they overshot a little bit and dialed it back. But I guess it's a thing where it's when it comes to data-driven stuff, and obviously this is business. It's where business versus creativity and vision get kind of muddled up in game design. But it's like, that was probably the correct decision, because it was, you know, the player base comes first to whoever's making that decision. So it is difficult. An unhappy community isn't necessarily bad for you unless you break them. I think, I guess the bitter medicine kind of analogy maybe works a bit better than I intended there. Yeah.
So in terms of other stories then, what have we got to cover for 9.0.5?
I'm not sure. Well, okay. Well, that's.
There we go. The Hall of Fame is full. How very exciting.
That's a big story. Hall of Fame is full. Good.
Yep. I don't care.
Yeah. Cross realm mythic. Cool. Nice.
Yeah.
Anything else? Well, apparently there's a lot.
So there is the patch notes to go through. Trying to work out what to really do. Okay. You know what? Let's do patch notes. Let's have a chat about them. With adventures, basically, nobody cares, but the TLDR is they have balanced it a bit more. Is the mission table something you'll actually want to do? No, probably not. I mean, it is a very easy way. Install the Venture Plan. Venture Plan, by the way, it's the add-on to get from what I understand. Install that. Yeah, use some Anima, but you get some stuff in return, and it's easy. That's the system. It'll be a bit more balanced now. That's all you really need to know. So we've got that. Then, actually, this is something that's good, interesting for me. I'm a hunter. It means I'm Night Fae, obviously, and it means I use Wild Spirits. That is a big ground effect. And one change that's actually coming in this patch is the Blizzard are, for other players, they are reducing the visual, just the visuals, I guess, of the likes of your Ashen Hollow, Abomination Limb, Swarming Mists, Death's Dew, Wild Spirits, those things. Now, I do have to wonder, does that mean there'll be more times where, I'll put my Wild Spirits down and then the boss and ads will move out of my Wild Spirits and I'll feel very sad because the tank won't know? Because, obviously a key part of tanking is positioning mobs so that your DPS players can actually get as much effectiveness as is possible.
Yes, or doing the direct opposite. That's also important.
Yeah. So, sort of interesting change. As for the rest, it's essentially just more balanced stuff. I mean, some of them are interesting to me, like, Unbound Chaos for the Unholy DKs. That being viable could be interesting because that could open up a slightly different gameplay vibe. Yeah. I enjoyed playing with it in beta. I don't know if anyone else did, though.
And is 500% up from 300% even enough?
Who the hell knows?
I think I'm not really super sure on the Havoc Demon Hunter situation, but as far as I can tell, they kind of have like 2 builds. And I think that might have been in one of them, but it's like there's a lot of little changes that don't super matter very much, just kind of solving little problems as they've cropped up.
Yeah, look, I had a look through this before stream, and I think your TLDR of this stuff is it's less about changing the balance of the game and changing the meta of the game, and it's far more about squashing the distance between the literally bad options that you're wrong for taking from a balance perspective and making those feel a little bit better. So, am I going to be using Flayed Shot as a hunter? No. But if I'm a hunter and I really want to be Venthyr, will I feel as punished for going as Venthyr? No, because that's getting buffed up. So, what do we got here?
So what we have here is, so they're doing a lot of balancing, but sometimes they're maybe not balancing super well. Windwalkers are generally not happy. So you'll see those fixes I have highlighted there. Basically a bunch of bugs that give them a lot of extra damage. That's really the super gist of it. And if it nothing to compensate that, and obviously an extremely good Windwalker monk will do a lot of damage, but they're generally a bit low comparatively, and they've just had what I think I might call accidental skill ceiling removed in terms of how they use Starbirth and Fire, how they use how they keep marks up for the spinning crane kick stuff.
I guess it's like the difference between the mage during Legion, the frost mage who knows how to time and distance everything to get was it more ice lances?
It was the double ice lance at the right latency and distance, and obviously that was a degenerate play style that came from very specific things and resulted in a lot of extra damage. So obviously to solve that, I can't remember if they solved it at the end of that or some other way by changing things, but I know they obviously in the Shadowlands slight redesign to Frost, they did change that by making double ice lance the bona fide play essentially. So
it's that thing of whenever it just sometimes stuff does not exactly work how the devs intended, and you can use that, you can game it basically.
So it's sad for Windwalkers. I think monks generally, outside of maybe Brewmasters, they really do need to be thrown a bone.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I used to main a monk. There is a pretty obvious reason why I no longer main a monk. The other thing then, so one of the things that has been redesigned is Fleshcraft.
Yes, Fleshcraft.
Where, basically it's going to be more usable in more situations. than a thing that you kind of very much have to use in advance. That is the core of the change.
And again, it's a case where this is basically a terrifying change because it's really, really big.
Yeah.
Like, look at that. That's a 20% DR, like a 20% DR channel that you can just pop whenever.
Kick the screen over to.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you can channel it, reduce damage to 20% for anyone who's taking, especially in the realms of high Mythic Plus and Mythic rating. That's the difference between life and death. That's basically way better for most situations than the other three, because obviously how they balance high stuff is unavoidable damage. So that is actually like, it's a case where I personally am afraid that this will overbalance and people will start ending up jumping over to Necrolord because they feel they need to. Because I mean, obviously as a Kyrian, the file is pretty handy for like emergency healing and stuff like that. But on Denathrius, I don't know how many weeks earlier we'd have had that kill on Heroic if I could have just popped an extra 20% DR whenever I needed to.
Yeah.
Versus the
file.
file.
Pretty big.
So it's like, obviously I'd have to use Vanquisher's Hammer and I'd rather not, but it's a case where there's maybe a little bit too much on that one specifically.
Yeah, but I mean, it being a bit more usable, that's definitely going to feel better for the Necrolords.
Oh, absolutely.
As we move through the other stuff, I mean, we did go through this, like Ember Court having less busy work once you get good at it. That's pretty neat. We've got Blizzard actually properly highlighting what's going on, other than key bits of information, like how much Valor points do you actually get from doing a dungeon. It would be nice to see the actual intended amount in the patch notes.
Yeah, it's a case where I think if they're worried about players getting feedback early in the stages, because obviously they talk up the PTR process really big, and rightfully so. They do the same with their alphas and their betas. I think having it was entirely through the beta, and I think the alpha, where they were constantly saying, "Oh, you haven't seen the full picture." So you we kind of have to ignore some of your feedback until you see the full picture and can talk to us about it. I'm kind of falling a little bit into the same thing here, because it's even people who aren't playing the PTR, even like people who can check the patch notes can easily go, sorry, your mathematics means this. We don't like that. Versus having to, wait till patch day and go, oh, here you go. Like,
yeah. And almost like kind of infinite struggle we've had is that one tricky thing of if we just knew the intent, or maybe the numbers, what they're supposed to be, we'd be able to offer more targeted feedback, and that's not been possible. Now, there is one thing that has been, I think, dashed. One hope that's been dashed. So, according to the data mining, there are actually upgrade levels up to item level 226. But if we look at the patch notes, you can see 220 item level requires the Keystone Master achievement. Now, does that mean that that's it? Surely if 226 is where it could go to, they maybe mention something about that in these patch notes, but it's not here in the patch notes.
Yeah, you would hope so at least.
So for those Mythic Plus players who are really wanting that and who are maybe looking at that data mining and feeling like, oh, maybe they've actually done it, it's not looking like it.
Yeah.
But it could easily be made that way in the future, because, I mean, those two upgrade levels do literally exist on the items. It's just if you bring those items to the vendor in game, they won't be displayed as an option. So who knows?
Yeah, I think that might be a case of maybe they're waiting to turn it on later. Maybe they're waiting to decide, do we make that achievement 20s? Do we make it 25s? Is that reasonable? I think they're a little bit struggling with that, I think. But
yeah, so overall, interesting situation. And if we're to wrap up this immediate breaking news sort of segment of the show, I think the TLDR is there's going to be more stuff in World of Warcraft pretty damn soon. So that's good. Mythic Plus players are going to be happy. Bunch of people in Covenants that are not meta picks, all going to be happy. Some class balancing is going to be moving in a better direction. That is all pretty damn good stuff. It's coming into the game pretty damn soon. Might not all be perfect, but it is thumbs up. We talk about issues and problems because those are often the more interesting things to talk about. They make better discussion, but we are literally moving in a better direction, and that is very good news. There's also a bit of good news for people like you and me, And also many of you who are watching because you like hearing about the current events in World of Warcraft. Blizzard did tell us that pretty soon after 9.0.5 leaves PTR, 9.1 will enter the PTR.
Yes.
And that does mean that soon we're going to know way more about Korthia, about domination gear from the Sanctum of Domination raid, about the lore, even the data mine broadcast text that can lead to some really fun lore speculations. That stuff is probably going to happen in March. So while you won't be able to play this new patch in March, at least some of that extended World of Warcraft enjoyment experience that comes from just being interested in the stuff that's going on, well, that's going to be happening. And I think that's overall pretty good news for a lot of us.
Yeah, I mean, if that's not part of being, or if that's not being part of a community of a game, I don't really know what is. I mean, honestly, I think I spend more time on r/roll and Wohead than I do in game during the week, and I think that's not a knock on it in any capacity. It's like I'm actually super engaged with it, just maybe not in a way that looks good on their daily active users graph.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, for me, the thing that I really want to get into from a testing perspective is the new Torghast, whatever the hell that will be. I'm going to have to play a lot of that and really try to give feedback and help with feedback because, Torghast, if we were to poll in chat, I don't think it would be a popular thing. But we both know that it has got so much potential, and this is the only time. Mm-hmm. Because if they cock it up in 9.1, people they're not going to be willing to come back in 9.2 for Torghast. So this is their big shot to make it good. And I think they can. I actually think they understand a bunch of the problems, at least based on what Morgan said to me, and that does actually give me a little bit of the old hope. Now that's not it for the stream, because it is going to be Control the Show pretty damn soon. So your super chats, stuff like that. If you've got topics, things, we do have one in the queue that we're going to do after the break. That's going to be a pretty big topic that I think a bunch of you do actually care about quite a bit. So we're going to pop off for about 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, and we'll see you pretty shortly.
See you later, everybody.
And the break is over, and that means that it is the Control the Show segment of the show, where you get to control the show with things like your super chats. We had, as an example, great super chat from Jay-Z, the man himself, and that gave us a pretty awesome segment about the Dreadlords. Next, though, we got a super chat from Lars Hansen, who says, has WoW not gradually become an esports game with a thin MMO surface? And I mean, that's a pretty big, it's a pretty big topic.
Ooh.
And it's one we have covered before, so I don't think it's the time to go mega deep, but we can see if we can get some new angles on this situation. And I mean, I essentially agree.
So do I.
Not even essentially. I entirely agree. World of Warcraft, the MMO bit's getting smaller and smaller, and the, esports is one way of putting it, but it's also like gameplay driven, performance driven.
Yeah, I think that's the way to admit it more.
Yeah. The way that me and Matt have always sort of talked about this to each other is like the Destiny-ification of WoW, where it's like very much about like, doing your weekly instance content, and that really is the core of the game. So it is an interesting thing. It's like, could you say that the MDI is ruining dungeons? I actually did once when I was just chatting in, I was like chatting in Guild. And what I meant when I said that, and, I don't actually think it like that, but it's like if every single dungeon has to be something that supports MDI style gameplay, then you cannot have Ubers anymore without it being a weird different thing. So our new mega dungeons, they're in as a mega dungeon. But it's like, does that mega dungeon eventually, having to be sliced into and turned into 2 Mythic Plus dungeons, does that impact the design? Does it impact the pacing? Do you have moments for like RP and, cool, flavorful shit that can happen in a dungeon that is maybe less of a thing these days? So there's a bunch of questions like that. There's then also, I think, the other side of it, and this is maybe the one that we haven't touched on as much, but you think about World of Warcraft's development resources, a lot of it obviously goes towards dungeons. I mean, the amount of dungeon changes, they've been hotfixing in so many of them recently, and it has been really good for the M+ community, seeing Blizzard, like, refine and iterate and things, and that has been really sweet. But you do wonder, are there other things that could be in the game? Other things they could be focusing on that are not necessarily this super gameplay driven on a time trial, etc. content.
Yeah, it's a case, if you think about it from like the pure like design playground perspective, there's always the case that if you're designing within certain bounds as a designer, you're kind of more, you can be more targeted, you can be a little bit like better within those bounds, but it completely cuts everything else out. It's like, it's not even a case of, what was the last dungeon that was longer than like 20-30 minutes? What was the last dungeon that really was super special? I think Court of Stars aside, which had tried some new stuff.
Yeah.
There wasn't really anything like too major. Even like Grimriel Depot was like, it was a very cool dungeon being on a train, etc., etc. But I think that still technically could have been close to Mythic Dungeon. But I guess the problem is that even when it comes to mega dungeons, they have this problem where they'll still have to split it up, so it'll have to be 2 or 3 Mythic Plus, well, I guess 2 Mythic Plusable segments, whereas all of the possibility outside of the bounds of dungeons is completely gone. Like, there's no way they'll go, like, they can't justify sitting down and going, right, okay, well, what if we do something super, super big? Like, can we absolutely break the entire boundary of what's considered a dungeon? Can we be massively creative in how we handle boss fights? They can't do that all anymore because it all has to fit within the thing. It's like, even like saying like UBRS as an example, with the rework, they kind of solved that back in a little bit in WoD, but it's still like, it was big, but it wasn't even like super, super amazing. It was a big journey and all that, same with like the massive size of BRD, but like, there's so much potential that we can't imagine, because we haven't had to imagine it, that we'll just kind of, we can't possibly get that anymore because of this, which I think is a lot of the esports problem, where it's all this gameplay driven stuff fit in within a box that players can expect, Whereas a lot of the aspect of what if,
Yeah.
the what if is gone.
And this is where I'm going to hit you with a bit of a what if, or a bit of a situation that I think is going on, because when anything is being designed, you got to think about all the bits in your toolbox. If you're making a dungeon, and that's a Mythic Plus dungeon, you know it could be tyrannical, or it could be, you know, whatever, right? You got your affixes. Now, that means that you can't just... You can't just, like, get a cool segment, put a bunch of mobs in it in a way that, you know, you just think, oh yeah, that looks cool, that'd be fun. Done. You can't, you obviously, I mean, I'm not saying this with any experience, I've never made a Mythic dungeon, but think about the people at Blizzard who are making a Mythic dungeon, right? Every time they place a pack, they've got to think, well, what is this pack like in the overall, you know, the routing of this dungeon, the pool? How do these packs and these mobs interact with these various different, you know, mechanics, you know, the affixes and stuff. Now, surely that makes it really quite hard to make a dungeon, doesn't it?
Yeah, you have to think about all of the potential, and sometimes even potential you don't know is there yet. Because I'm thinking, like, if we think about like the season 3 affix, so that is, they can't do anything super interesting that's way against the rules of mob design, because if that has an impact with like a planned affix, they're kind of gonna maybe they would like they could make an exception possibly, but it's more likely to go, it's not worth it, it's not worth the bother. I'll just keep it simple, I'll keep it plain, which means every dungeon's going to feel like you've got packs that are designed for an MDT writer to pick out from,
Yeah.
and stuff like that, instead of like a massive gigantic pack that's going to be unkillable anything higher or anything like super unique. It's just, I'm trying to think of I can never remember the name of it, but that recent one, the new swirly whirlwind melee can go down a pit.
Oh,
one.
yeah.
That one, like, that means that you have to be super careful every time you put a spinny or like a melee focused thing, or even any ground targeting, because even when they do, it just feels terrible.
Yeah, it's going to be limiting design. So
Yeah.
it's a sort of thing, for one segment of the player base, this is all really good. This is intricate, engaging game design where, you know, those different combos of affixes, it means that you're now thinking about a route. You know, you're looking at the tier list of this week, and you're doing all of those things. There's another group of people who are just like, I don't care about any of that. I'm here to do a dungeon. Just like, you know, I do dungeons, and I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons with my friends. I did dungeons in old games where dungeons were a bit more old school. This WoW thing is no longer a dungeon for me. So for those people, it's going to be a difference. I think that's why personally, like, the idea of a new mega dungeon that has hard modes is so incredibly exciting. Because I guess those hard modes are, I mean, not a thing active in M+ or whatever, right? Because that's...
No.
That's what's extremely exciting for me about a new mega dungeon. That's actually almost the prime thing I'm really hyped about for the next big patch. Is that. And it's because for me, it's just that promise of totally, you know, there's a new setting, there's going to be more creativity, more, you know, wackiness, more uniqueness with each boss, because it's going to have its own hard mode in that dungeon. Whereas those are things that maybe will not work with all the different affixes and stuff.
Yeah, so it's a case of, imagine, like, you could think, okay, they can put the hard modes in because it's a big Mythic mega dungeon that won't be a Mythic Plus for like a patch or so. It's going to be it's set in a way where people will have to be like decently geared and experienced with their class to actually play it, as opposed to having to scale down to normal, where people will just be like, yeah, whatever. It's a complete breeze. So it's like, imagine that, but extrapolate it out further. They can make a mega dungeon that ultimately has to fit into a Mythic Plus, like a patch later. They can just turn off hard modes. But imagine what that dungeon would look like if it never had to become a Mythic Plus dungeon.
That's it.
If the hard modes could be, like, not necessarily baked in, because then, you know, you'd want them to be optional. But the possibility of them throwing wild curveballs, especially in something as insane as the Broker City. Like, the complete nonsense you could get up to there would be really fun, I think. Even stuff like... there's definitely a way this could fit into Mythic dungeons, but I'm imagining kind of Hearthstone stuff. Whenever, like, if we're going in the dungeon, I believe, from the press kit, we're going to Azeroth to get like some artifacts and stuff.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, so I'm thinking the Hearthstone artifacts where they just do crazy unbalanced broken shit, and they probably wouldn't let that fly in a Mythic dungeon because, you know, you go to, not to blame the MDI because they do try to balance all of the Mythic dungeons regardless of the MDI, but it's a case where if you had a random artifact that could just like make the rest of the dungeon a breeze, or even a hard mode artifact that would make it like a nightmare by randomly polymorphing you while you held it, stuff like that wouldn't really fly in a Mythic setting, or in a Mythic Plus setting, but it would be a really fun experience. And that all the possibility there's kind of dead.
Yeah, so it's really hard to tie this one in a bow. For me, it would just come down to, we gotta let M plus be what M plus is. We gotta let rating and let them be what they are. I think the best way to respond to it is to simplify the things around the gameplay, and then for the effort to go elsewhere. Yeah. Because the other part of this question, this is a two-pronged question in a way, where Lars was talking about not just the esportsy elements, and maybe, you know, if you see a lot of effort go into those esportsy feeling things and that's not something you want to do, you're obviously going to feel like, oh, well, they're not focusing a bit that I like. So I think the thing to do is not to take anything away from those M plus players, because in many cases they're having a great time, and the system has been a big success in many ways. Instead, I think it's make the MMO bit less thin, as Lars says. And as to what that is, I mean, there's the usual suspects of player housing, more customizations, and various different things like that. There is more professions. We'll get into professions in a second because somebody did have a question on them.
Oh, nice.
It is armor tinting. It is more armor customization. It is old school reputations. I've done that shtick multiple times on this stream. I'm not going to do it again. You can go to our clips channel if you want to see that. I think it's coming out in the next few days, that clip from the stream. It's those things. It's basically World of Warcraft being like, cool, we actually get hundreds of thousands of views on our MDI. We have all of these players having a great time in M+ and all that stuff. What's the next thing to focus on? And I think it's very simple. I think it basically is just things that make the RPG part of World of Warcraft better in a non-expansion specific basis. I think that is the most important thing to do. And then secondary to that is things like within an expansion having way, way, way better loot and stuff.
Yeah.
So that then
I mean, I'm going to put it in a very simple way. It's like, it kind of feels like a dichotomy. It's like, is WoW esports? Is it an RPG? And the very, like, the simple question, the simple answer beyond simple is, it can be both. it can just be both. You can totally have Mythic Plus, and you can totally have armor tinting. I mean, armor tinting, I went on a little journey in my own head there, thinking about the FF14 Glamours subreddit, where people just like, they go get the armor tinted correctly and go, oh, here's my rogue, which looks like this anime character, and you're like, nice. That's really cool, like, way of sort of self-expression and creativity within the game. So it's like not even just armor tinting, but it's like that other stuff. Go for it. Just put it in the game.
It's probably Marvel characters for the more Western audience versus FF.
Yeah,
but I 100% agree.
Yeah, it's a case of, so you've got all of these devs working on this game and it's bringing in all this money. There's very little in the long term. In the short term is difficult, but in the long term, there's no real reason they don't go, okay, so we've got these devs over here. They're all looking for a job. Do you want to work on World of Warcraft? Yep. What do you want to can we have houses? Can we have, armor tinting? Can we have all other stuff? Can we have profession updates, please?
That actually does, just to finish off Lars's question, that does actually get me to a big thing. And that is kind of like the multiplier effect on dev time. So a thing that is relevant to the casual and collection-oriented player base is new things to do and collect, right? So you can have your devs make some new heritage armor. Cool. Go get your heritage armor. You're done. But that's just the thing you sort of get and you're done, right? It's not really that multiplicative in terms of the dev time. Whereas sometimes if you build a big new fancy system, that can be highly multiplicative. Transmog is a big example of that. You make the system, and then via that system, players can create endless hours of their own fun. So that's where I would come in and say that instead of, all of this pussyfooting about, the restrictions of the transmog system, it would make a lot more sense to try to work out armor tinting systems and stuff like that, such that the toy box offered to players within their World of Warcraft subscription is a larger toy box that has more interesting toys instead of just more of the same toys. So for me, it's trying to get that the stuff where it's like, yeah, these dev hours, sure, it could just, you do your dev hours and then cool, a player can go spend a few hours, get the thing, and then they're done. Or maybe you could spend slightly more dev hours or a lot more dev hours, and that could create a cool new system that could be super transformative and could unleash an engine of creativity within the player base. I would maybe say that that's something we should think about. There's so many games like your Animal Crossings and a lot of those ones that are heavily based off the self-expression of the audience, which is what an MMO is. Right now, we kind of call them toons and we're very gameplay oriented. In the past, it was called your avatar for a reason, right? So that's capping off Lars's super chat. Lars, thank you for the super chat. Oh, take a big breath. We've since got two more super chats, though. Yes, we have got from Grant Johnson, a 5 buckaroo, and from Cameron Stewart, a 10 buckaroo. So, that does mean that the show is being controlled by two fine gents. So, for Grant first. Grant says, thoughts on adding a loot token, much like Garrosh in MoP in older raids, to help Xmog players get tier sets. And I think this is very much inspired by Grant spending 14 weeks trying to get the pants from Argus. So, to really go and try to dive into the core theme of Grant's question, I think it is that Grant is probably one of those more collections and transmog and stuff oriented players, or maybe isn't and just wants to get that final bit for their their final set.
I've been there.
But do you think there's a way that Blizzard could make some of that collection gameplay better? I mean, I'm not 100% sure myself, but I do remember there was times where they shook it up for PvP specifically with the Marks of Honor system.
That's so great. I love that so much.
Yeah,
it's allowed me to there was a period of time in, I think it was I can't remember if it was end of Warlords or end of Legion when I was playing a lot anyway, and I was like, okay, I'm really invested in my character. I want some of this PvP gear. I'm kind of tired of this silver handset I've been wearing for the whole expansion. Okay, let's go get something. So I went and I spent a couple days in doing BGs for a big stack of marks, and I went, okay, time to go. Basically I earned a currency and I went shopping. And I was like, okay, here's this outfit looks cute. Here we go. Off we go. It was great. I think they almost certainly could get away with so much stuff there. I think it maybe looks good for gameplay hours that, I don't know if he's still doing it regularly, but Nikki used to go Mythic Xavius over and over again for the Nightmare Horns, or whatever they were, Shoulders?
Yeah,
shoulders.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the other ones, but yeah, it's a case where that's not been designed. They've never actually designed that, and I'm thinking about the sort of idea I've had on and off, and I think you've had some of it as well, where it's that's a big part of how people play. People revisit old content because the old content has stuff they want. I don't know how many times I've run through S-Crown Citadel for Invincible. I don't know how many times I've run through basically any of the old stuff. And even whenever I have a day to play World of Warcraft and I feel like, I'll play for a while, I usually end up doing a big journey around expansions I haven't cleared on my character to grab stuff. And it's a case where they could design almost like they did with fishing in Legion.
Oh, interesting.
They could do so much there. Remember Bear Tartar?
Yeah.
And everyone went, okay, this is great. This is absolutely fantastic. These incredible speed sets we all have. We're all going flying. We're going full speed around all this stuff. And it's no fun allowed. The no fun allowed police have come, and that's gone. So why not do that, but for fishing?
Or for...
Sorry, yes.
Yeah,
do the fishing thing for that, which is to say, can we have an artifact for old collecting stuff? Do you want to tie it into archaeology because it's technically the past?
Yeah.
Give us a talent tree that makes us run faster in legacy raids, gives us maybe more loot. I don't know if that's technically possible because of how loot tables are done, but like give us more loot, give us more movement speed, let us kill stuff better. I mean, the same with like the fact that people struggle with Mythic Legion content and BFA content still not doable. It's like, just give someone like a couple months to design a whole system around that, a whole bunch of gameplay, a whole bunch of like completely separate talents, and look at that. You've got something that will make all of your content that you already spent money and time making significantly more relevant. Not necessarily relevant to current patches like season or gearing. But it'll make it all relevant, and then it'll do the same going forward.
I think that makes actually massive sense. And there's this thing. There's a lot of content in World of Warcraft, and there is so little that you want to do because World of Warcraft is developed in a very... The new thing is the new thing, and that's really all you care about. And there's obviously so many people that go back, they do the old raids, the old dungeons, they want to get all their sets. You do then wonder, is there some way that Blizzard could have some form of system that could make good on all of that old content, I guess in a way that's not time walking? Or maybe expand it into some sort of new time walking. I have to wonder, is there a situation, or is it just the thing where time walking is a weekly event, sometimes happens. That was cool in the past. Whereas like, oh cool, an event. Whereas now people are like, oh, if they want to do time walking, which, I mean, who really knows of the current gear? Sort of, I mean, it's not that great gear, is it? Yeah. I mean, it's like 158 or something, so it's not that relevant.
It's 158 from the dungeon and then 200 at the end. Which is kind of, I mean, 200 is fine for like a couple players, especially catch up, but generally, no.
So is it time for patch 9.2.5 time walking version 2? It's always on and it's a new system you can go and engage with. Would that be some form of way for Blizzard to actually do something with all of this old content they've got in the game that is really good content, that's got, in some cases, like strong narrative? You know, even if could you just do a quest line for Wrath of the Lich King and you follow that quest line, actually takes you through the end game journey, gives you the context and the characters. Maybe Chromie runs it and you get some cool stuff at the end. And, maybe you do something where it impacts the gear that you get. Maybe it's another way to get some of the gear, but something that would make good on all of that old content. I think for maybe people like who I think Grant is, who would enjoy that, something like that could be really big. I mean, if that came back as a patch feature, I'd totally come back. I know in the past, and okay, I was a hunter, so one of the things that just as a part of the hunter community, you and the fellow hunters would all care about soloing things. So, I mean, I even remember going around soloing Utgard Pinnacle, the dungeon, when I was in my Ice Crown Citadel gear. Not really sure why I did that, but it was just cool. It was also pretty easy. Absolutely not an achievement to have done that. So there's a big potential there. I would be super interested if maybe somebody in the WoW team just had that strike of inspiration or passion or whatever. And, hopefully somebody gets that strike and can go to their boss and be like, hey, I think I have a good idea. And it happens. Because that could be very big.
Yeah, I mean, here's a very, very quick version of that would actually tie right back into Grant's question pretty well. So they obviously have the ability to give you ensembles. So what they do is time walking, still make it maybe an event, maybe something like that. Maybe like it's up for a week every month and you're like can do as much of it as you want. But Chromie time let you select a whole like expansion. What if you selected a tier and then got a very short quest line, no gameplay changes. Basically make it so you run around one shot and everything because it doesn't matter that much. But you just go get the quest. You speak to a couple people, and they have like quick dialogue going. Oh yeah, maybe it's Chromie with you the whole time. Might be expensive on voice acting, but like Chromie's going. Oh yeah, remember the time you or the heroes of whatever came here and sorted this out and killed all this. And here's like it's all framed as technically being the past, but you just run around one shotting stuff. And then at the end it's like, oh yeah, thanks for coming on this journey with me. Here you go. Here's the ensemble, which is that tier for your current class, maybe.
Yeah, something like that would be awesome.
Maybe something you could even send to an alt as a token to redeem, or even for like a weapon set, something like that. Just anything where it's like, here's the narrative framing So this doesn't feel like you're just going and doing old stuff, but it's like, yeah, remember this was cool, here's all the stuff. I hope you had a good like evening of doing that, as opposed to feeling really pissed off every time you don't get the weapon you want.
Yeah. Which I think is overall to say there's really incredible potential here. We enjoy doing that old stuff anyway in the game. And if Blizzard was to do more there, I think there would be many claps from us, and that would be pretty awesome.
Fantastic.
So we actually have got 3 more super chats since then.
Nice.
We've got Colin coming in there with the 5 United States dollary dues. And then we've got Eric and Miko, who are both coming in with those 50 Swedish kroner. Is it krona? Krona, yes. So I actually think that, it's Cameron, going to Cameron's question, which we need to do. Do you think soloable dungeons like Torghast should become more common and impactful like Mythic Plus in regards to story and gearing? And I think that is something that's actually quite interesting, because what is one of the greatest things Blizzard have ever put into the game? And that's a bit of a thing to throw at you. The answer is Warlock Greenfire.
Oh, yes, of course.
Which was awesome.
Absolutely.
And, the other solo difficult content they've done has been pretty cool. I even remember in Tanan Jungle, they made a little boss fight rare for hunters. Yep. And that was really cool. So Cameron's question is, do you think that stuff should be more common and impactful in terms of story and gearing? I think that in terms of gearing, it should exist as a path for gearing in some way, but it should not outpace the other things.
Yeah.
I think that raiding will give you, if you can just go in, do a raid, and everyone's really good, that I do believe should give you the most gear for the amount of time that you spend, because of the difficulty of the content and also the organizational effort of getting your 10 to 25 people or 10 to 30 people there. And then, next is Mythic Plus, where, the whole thing there is you can get more gear, you can do it whenever you want, and sort of balance in that different way. And that's how Blizzard have balanced it since day one of Mythic Plus. So if we're kind of going in this curve, I think that solo stuff does have to sit below raiding and below Mythic Plus and below PvP, because it's something you can just do in your own. And if that was the best way to get your gear, that would not, I think, be a good thing. I think that would be the solo stuff taking away from the group stuff. And the group stuff and the Mythic Plus play, that's, a bunch of that group stuff is the core of what an MMO is. But that said, the prospect of challenging solo content that I can get gear from is really good. Torghast. I mean,
Yes.
if Torghast was only Twisting Corridors, and, it was more like a traditional roguelite game, where no matter how far you get in it, you get a box of loot at the end, and that could give you some loot for your character, could give you some Stygia for your upgrades for Torghast. That could be quite fun. And you could actually, if a system like that existed, you could have players for whom their World of Warcraft gameplay experiences, they do their Covenant stuff, they do whatever other things they want to do in the game, and instead of, going for a Mythic Plus with their friends, or maybe their friends aren't there that night, they go in, they can do their Twisting Corridors. Every single run gives them Stygia or whatever that they can use to upgrade their character in Torghast. It can then give them some gear, and they will slowly get better and better and better. Will it be something that Mythic Plus players and Raiders will want to do and PvP players? No, absolutely not. But would that be a really exciting form of gameplay? I mean, to go to me as an example, which is that sort of thing, I'm obviously going to be biased because it would slot into... It would basically, this combined with old school reputations would fix so much of why I stopped playing the game in BFA. Where, if I could do something like that version of Torghast I just talked about, and then I would also have some, sort of old school fun style reps to do that were different and varied, that would mean that whenever I cannot play with a group of people, I would feel like I still have reasons to log into World of Warcraft and play it. And the reasons why I didn't drop my sub because I'm on the 6-month one. And, even if I'm not actively playing a lot of World of Warcraft, I still have, still logging in and doing things, obviously. Which, it's one of those things where there absolutely have been times where if the channel didn't exist, it's like I would still be following World of Warcraft and lore, but I wouldn't have a reason to log in. So the personal financial decision would be to drop the sub. But you know, for me, even in those times, like I would have to log into World of Warcraft so frequently to do stuff that actually, you know, would be fun in the context of, you know, just doing things and stuff with work, but wouldn't exactly be what I want to do. And a lot of that was because the only way to play World of Warcraft during those bits of BFA that I could see that would be fun is M+. And, you know, it's M+, and it's rating. And if I didn't have a group of people to play with, I couldn't do those things. Whereas if, going to Cameron's question, if there was stuff like soloable, you know, sort of some sort of solo dungeon, things like Torghast, yeah, totally I could do that. And you know what's really funny? There are solo dungeons in the game. They're called scenarios.
Oh,
I don't mean Mists of Pandaria. No, I do not mean MOP scenarios. But those times where Blizzard pulls you through a loading screen to do a bit of a storyline, that's kind of a solo dungeon from a technical perspective in the back end. It's just that Blizzard they never really put difficulty into those. Now, if you're telling me that the Night Fae campaign could be balanced such that I, as a person who can get... I'm not saying that ahead of the curve Denathrius is a super big deal. It's not. Just about anybody who's consistently playing the game is going to be able to do that. Yep. But it does at least show that, you know, there's that level of mechanical competence that, like, you get World of Warcraft, you can do it. So if me as a player of around that skill level would be able to play my Night Fae Covenant campaign in a way where it would actually challenge me, and I'd feel accomplished for beating it and defeating those bosses, and I get some cool shit at the end. Wow. That content is suddenly interesting to me. Like, one of the main reasons why the Night Fae campaign kind of sucked to me is because I was never expressing myself through gameplay. You know, if those bosses, like, you know, the boss near around Aralon and stuff, if that was a boss fight that I went and did and was a boss fight, a solo boss fight that felt like a boss in a game, I'd be there and I'd be enjoying that more. And you could probably put a reward system around that. And then, you know, you could probably think about all of the other similar styles of content in the game in the past. You could probably put those into some sort of system where they could be scaled to always be relevant. And then that solo challenge could always exist. And I think Final Fantasy XIV does that.
Yeah, so that's where I was going to interject. You're talking, solo fights. Wouldn't it be really cool if a solo fight felt like a boss fight? And it's not always in terms of difficulty, because most of playing catch-up through FF14's main story has been, you know, you go buy crafted gear, you're in end game of that expansion for the entire expansion sort of story content, so you are wrecking it. But it's just, a boss fight feels like a boss fight, because it's this, they just go, okay, this boss has a ton of mechanics, and honestly, like for the main villain of Stormblood, the mechanics that you have to deal with a couple times you fight them, that's the raid boss version's mechanics. But they add more, but it's like the same stuff where they set up the theming, they set up all of that stuff, because it is a boss fight. It feels like one, and they always manage to get that feeling of this is solo content that feels like it, as opposed to this is just me on my way to playing the game, which is where I actually had a very interesting thought and a bit of a flashback to, I think it was the first time I ever played Mage, and like ever played one half properly, was in Mists of Pandaria, and you know why, the Timeless Isle. I went to the Timeless Isle. I was horrendously undergeared, and the Isle was a challenge. The Isle was a challenge. I had to, like, I'd always played a druid before that and a little bit of DK. I first learned to properly kite those goddamn frogs. And I was like, oh, look at me, I've learned to kite. That felt like a little solo challenge that I could go and do, and I could get gear from it, which was catch-up gear. So I'm kind of thinking, why for catch-up, why is that not like a solo thing that you can do before you hit the current like season level, and then you can join the big boys at the table playing the game? If you just have a solo challenge, which is a sense of gearing up, I don't know what that could be, whatever kind of content, but it's just a case of, can we have those, please? Also outside of like the gearing loop, because I don't see it fitting in. It's like, as you said, I don't see it fitting into the gearing loop in a way that it, you know, could ever compete with group content, because that's the whole point of the game. But it's the same with Destiny. By the time you're done all the solo content in the Destiny expansion, and it starts to go, okay, now you have to jump into whatever form of content it is, be it like strikes, be it whatever. You have to bring friends now, or we'll match you, etc., etc. But there's room for that in the gearing cycle, absolutely. Yeah. And then there's room for green fire. There's room for all the green fires in the world, because that was great. And I did it. I did it on my warlock, end of BFA, so it wasn't really anything challenge, but it was still cool. And I really regret not doing that before Legion, because during Legion, all of that lore led up into class order hall stuff. You met all the core characters before that.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Stuff was fantastic.
Yeah, and even in the community side, like the amount of people watching Sparkugs, watching... is it Sparky that people call him? I don't know if he's still playing the game, but people would be watching, his... Oh, here's how you can do Warlock Green Fire naked with no gear. And you're like, damn, that's really cool. So to draw this one to a close, I think that type of content, awesome. The other thing you bring up, the Timeless Isles, what was so cool about it to me is the enemies in the Timeless Isles were real dickheads. Now, I'm not saying they were super hard. Yeah. Anyone could deal with them, but you had to deal with them. The game had rules. And right now, a bunch of just anything you do solo. I mean, fighting a regular-ass elite mob in the Timeless Isles, generally speaking, harder than the final boss of your Covenant Order Hall, or your Covenant campaign. For sure. That is absolutely bonkers, and I think we need to get back to the Timeless Isle in terms of, the spooky enemy should feel spooky, because that is going to make me feel like I'm being challenged, the way that my character is being challenged, and suddenly I'm immersed in the game rather than going through a Covenant campaign step because I want to get renown. So that's where I think it's time to nip that one in the bud. I think good discussion, and definitely something that Blizzard should think about in the future.
100%.
So, thank you. Thank you, Cameron. Awesome one.
Thanks, Cam.
Next up, we've got Colin Bashor, who says, how do you feel about class meta attitudes and the issues associated with public opinion?
Oh, that's a fun one. That's a really fun one.
Infinite can of worms. Because I think that if the World of Warcraft developers have got to target everything towards a balanced meta, game's going to be real boring. Real boring. Because, perfect balance is, how do you get that? How do you, I always say, how do you balance, Flayed Shot and Wild Spirits to not be a mechanical decision under any circumstance? Yeah. You can't. No, you can't. But you still should be able to have the cool big AoE one, and then the cool single target one that lets you do your kill shot, because that's two different fun types of gameplay. So how the hell do Blizzard do this, and how do you get past the player issues where it's sure, there's some balance things led to, say, the faction balance issue and the meta that's happened there, but also so much of it is the network effect and the fact that the communities have formed over there for high-end play, and therefore it's just going to skew more horde, because that's how it's been set up. How the hell do you deal with these metas?
It's actually... Okay, this may not be the most satisfying answer I could possibly give, but I think the simplest way is a combination of two things. Combination one is get rid of the outliers. So never do an 8.1 sub-rogue again. Never do that. Never do a 6 point whatever demo lock.
Oh yeah.
Just never have a class feel like they are actually being shot into space, because that's what happens so many times. Try your best to keep those up, and just apply massive buffs where they needed. Just go, whatever, you're so bad, we'll need to fix you. That's step one. Just to stop, you want to stop people feeling terrible. People feeling good is fine, I think.
Yeah.
Being the best is oh yeah, I chose correctly. Just don't have people think, oh, I chose, I'm so dumb, my beloved class is gone. Never do that. But the second part of that is the cyclical thing, or the cyclical balance, where it is just keep throwing ingredients into the pot, swap stuff around, and try to avoid that feeling terrible. It's a case where, Holy Paladins, they've seen some nerfs in these patch notes. Good. Hurts me to say, but we're a bit busted.
Your Holy Shock is 2% more expensive now.
Yeah, so maybe I'll actually go through mana when I'm not being so stupid and spamming Flash of Light for no good reason. For a bit of context there, Holy Paladin mana costs are so low that our expected gameplay with a Glimmer build and using Shock Barrier Legendary, mana's not a problem. It's a problem for other classes. We also do too much single target damage, which is, kind of stupid for a healer, but we're just too strong. Take that down. It'll hurt me, but it'll stop Mistweaver monks feeling like they've been shot, like they haven't been taken out the back and gotten rid of. Try to avoid that feeling and cycle things around, keep things a bit fresh. And here's the real kicker, I think. Try to enable that without destroying classes, because a lot of the problem is you see the same problem in games where you pick like a hero or you pick something for a short period of time. In League they can cyclically balance all day long. Yeah. Because such a small percentage of the player base are like super mains on a character that go, damn it, well, Darius isn't so strong in this patch, I guess I'll just have to go back to playing Malphite. God, I think I've aged my League of Legends gameplay by using those two. But like they can't do that with classes, so do that with your systems. Do that with like a couple talents. Let things cycle in and out. Don't make people feel like their class is bad. And then that's all you can really do.
Yeah, so for some reason I'm gonna switch it over from Mr. Rich Evans to Mr. Mike Stoklasa. That has no significance, but we can assign significance to it if we really want to. It's that sort of thing. There's always going to be a mathematically best option. People are always going to work that out, and the top end's always going to gravitate in that direction. Yeah, for sure. I think the best that we can do is, or the best that can be done, is to mitigate the, as you said, basically damage mitigation and making sure it's not too busted overall. Yep. And then I think the best thing you can do is, I don't mean ignore it in a stick your head in the sand, but you kind of just have to accept the meta is going to form. You got to be comfortable with the meta forming, make sure it's not too damaging for the game, and then I guess move on and do other things, because I don't really know if there's a way to fix this that, that isn't like the PvP system of Legion or whatever, where, they just were like, we've achieved sort of better balance by just scaling everybody automatically, where that starts to, is it more balanced? Yes. Does it sort of start to damage the game a bit? Yes. So I think that's the situation there. Yeah. Moving over to Eric then. Eric says, how could professions be improved in your opinion? I would personally love a more open dynamic system with actual gameplay in crafting. So I have to imagine that there's a bit of a Final Fantasy XIV jumping out of you at this one. For me, it's basically just, I think about this from an economics perspective. I am interested in economics generally, and also, in RuneScape, I was there, in the arrow market. I was selling them, crafting them, having my suppliers for the ores that I needed. And like that was pretty good gameplay. So for me, it's just the economy should be more interesting. We need more things like the shuffles. Yeah. I was big into doing my Cobalt shuffle, and my other shuffles, as time went on. I was reading blogs like Just My 2 Copper. Definitely aging myself there. My normals are Just My 2 Copper and Warcraft Hunters Union and all that stuff.
Female Dwarf Hunter.
FemaleDwarfHunter.com, the great simming tool that took me through Icecrown Citadel. So for me, it is just, how do you make that more interesting and more broad from an economic perspective? And I think that just means, more materials, more crafted things, more stuff to do, more toys that you can make that are cool, more transmog sets that people can make that, have interesting components to them that bring multiple professions together. For me, it's basically just that. Now, as to bringing in actual gameplay and crafting, I'm fairly sure that's when the Final Fantasy XIV comes out again, right?
Yes. So FF14 crafting, when you equip a weapon in FF14, you change your class. When you put on a weapon that's a crafting weapon, it's a disciple of the hand. You're a crafter. There's disciples of war for like melee classes and etc. There's disciples of magic. There's disciples of the hand and of the land. Of the land are those who go and get resources. They're the miners, they're the botanists, etc., etc. And then you've got the disciples of the hand, who are the crafters. And I don't know much about this like in detail, but I remember the first time I leveled a blacksmith, or was it a goldsmith, one of the two, to 15, and that was basically one day of me just being like, what is this? What do you mean there's gameplay involved? When I'm crafting something, I have buttons to think about and buttons to press. And it's essentially like you have to fill up a meter of it being completed without, I can't remember exactly, but basically there's a fail state on crafting. And if you use because FF items have a high quality variant, so you can have a regular item or a high quality one that's just a little icon, usually worth more. But in crafting, use high quality items that are just rare to get, and then you can make a high quality crafted item out of it. And to get the high quality, it's you've got success, and then you've got HQ item. So you have to actually manage what you're doing when sitting there over the anvil hitting stuff.
Huh.
So there is a fail state. I mean, it might have changed a lot since then. The last time I crafted was early Heavensward, I think. But it's a case where that is there, and then land is a bit simpler overall, but there's gameplay there. And if you want to be a very good crafter, that's a level 80 blacksmith, or is it armor blacksmith? I can't remember what it's called, but you can be one of those, and that's a thing. That's what you do in that game.
Interesting.
It's a whole different angle of gameplay. There's actually a friend of mine who was keeping me up to date with his place on the Ishgardian Restoration leaderboard, because there was a reward of a title for being in the top 10 on this leaderboard of how much you've contributed to this restoration through crafting. And it was just all this absolutely mad stuff going on. But it was basically, this is a gameplay loop. This is an entirely separate part of gameplay. This isn't like a side, like a little bit of, you'll do this every now and again to get your mats for raid. It's just, this is what you do.
Yeah, it's an actual full form of gameplay.
Yeah, so they have their different weapons that you get that you go through quest lines for and upgrade as you go. They've got that for the relic weapons. They've got that for crafting as well. So the way we went and got in BFA those legendary kind of tier, the blacksmith hammer that could repair a bit of gear, that stuff. The jewel crafting one, I think, could remove a gem without destroying it. They basically have kind of similar of, this is your crafting tool, but it's actually it's a big piece of lore. It has its lore beside it. It has its stuff. It's all gameplay. It's a big part of what you want to do if you're that way inclined. It's a kind of case of, you log in to be this. You log in to be a raider in WoW. You log in to be a Mythic Plus player. You log in to be, you log in to be a PvPer. Some people log in to be people who play the auction house, which is entirely different and it's less designed around because it's natural. But then there's people who log in to FF because they're a high level crafter, and that's a whole gameplay avenue that's hundreds of hours of you to go down. And
it's almost like it's not just gameplay for the sake of earning gold in game.
Yeah, no.
It's a full on way of playing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. I mean, that's something that I cannot get into as a player because that will destroy me.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You're going there from a way more overall gameplay progression system focus. Mm-hmm. For me, I'd naturally be more like the EVE Online side of things.
Yeah.
But I think there's a way that those two things, and I think they actually do meet in EVE, but there's a way that those can mesh together.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the big things. It's basically, I mean, obviously if you want to shuffle stuff, there's no prerequisite in WoW. If you want to get raw mats turned into something and sell it, there's no prerequisite in that. So you'll see raw mats being it's almost the reverse, where especially at the start of the expansion, raw mats were so much more expensive than the result because there's no barrier to turning it into the result. It was actually better for you to level your cooking, so you would rather buy the raw materials than this, even if it was more expensive. And that's kind of obviously that's the reverse of what it is in real life. I mean, if you want a computer, you don't just go out and get a bunch of silicon. I can just do this myself for free. It's easy. It's just an afternoon. Oh, look at that. I've made myself a graphics card. It's a case where there should be some level of expertise involved in crafting. I mean, how to do that in WoW is a different story. They obviously tried with legendary items, but I don't think that went well in the end because of how legendaries are.
So So I think the overall TLDR is basically just, yeah, I'll have to have a look at FF and see how that operates.
Yeah, because that is it's an entirely different ballgame, effectively, and not to espouse the virtues of that game like overly, although I'm obviously guilty of that. It's fine. WoW doesn't have any gameplay professions. It had for fishing. They should do fishing, but for everything, and it should be the case where you know, it's a thing you have to go and do. It's not a thing that you get for free, or like it's a gold thing. It should be like yeah, you have to go in this.
I feel like the issue you'd have there is a lot of the existing community is very much based on, you know, mass creation, mass crafting. I think you have a situation where it's like the percentage of people who engage in crafting versus, you know, those who are supplied by those crafters is probably really quite whack.
Yeah.
So we'd have a situation where I think the existing crafting community would basically hate that.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Because they'd be like, really? To make 100 of these, I now have to play a Mass Effect 1 hacking minigame? What are you talking about? But if you did that really, really well, it could actually open it up as a new type of gameplay for a new audience.
Yeah. Well, FF gets around that problem for math stuff because once you're a high enough level or once you've done it enough times, you can autocraft it.
Okay, well, that fixes that problem.
But if you want to do it high quality, you have to put a little bit of effort in it, I think. Like I said, I never got particularly high level, and I don't know too much about it, but yeah, it's a little bit more involved if you want to actually be up there.
Yeah, so we've got another super chat coming in from James George, who says, what I think is really missing from retail is the sense of exploration. Classic WoW is the smallest WoW has ever been, but it feels the biggest. Thoughts? And I think it's actually really simple to give James the answer here. Number one, Classic WoW is small, but it takes a long ass time to get anywhere. And I mean, that's something that's even recently with the portal changes caused drama in modern WoW. But I think it's actually a bit more clear than that. And I think it is that if you want to get your stuff done in Classic, everything takes longer. And the world is way more the world. You know, with like having less teleports and less stuff like that. So having that economy that is, well, I mean, the Classic economy, we all know how it's different to the current one. Having like more of those player goals, and you know, you want to get your resist gear, you need your various different potions and all that stuff to be ready for raid, but all that stuff is way harder to do and is just in this world that makes it feel slightly more sandboxy. And I think that's basically the thing. WoW's got like slightly less sandboxy as times went on. Now it has always been a theme park MMO and a solvable game in that sense. But Classic is the least that WoW is like that. So I think that's really the core of why it feels bigger in the past. And then I think the core of why it feels smaller now is like it's very focused. You know, at WoW, it's like you do all this big leveling and stuff, but it's like past that, those leveling worlds basically don't matter, you know, bar world quests, but those feel very systematized and just infinite content, which then doesn't really feel like content. And then WoW, it's like, what is WoW? Well, it's getting more gear in your character, and that means you're doing these pretty specific, pretty tightly bounded, you know, gameplay systems like your Mythic Plus and, you know, all of that stuff. And it's just that it's felt more and more and more like a Destiny endgame over time. And I think that basically is the core of it. WoW 2 has already happened. You're playing it right now. WoW 1 is that older, more janky, and you could maybe say somewhat accidentally more sandboxy game. I'd love to see the modern game, and I think some of the things we've talked about have made, you know, could be things that would make it feel more sandboxy, you know, in various discussions today.
Sure.
So I think that's basically it. Modern WoW really does funnel you into some things. I think Classic, like, it did do that to a degree. Like, to get your gear, you still had to go and do dungeons and raids. It's just that overall process, I think, had so many different moving parts, and in a way, like, was so kind of tightly focused in your server community, in a way that it isn't now. You know, it's like your relationship. This is almost like, you know, do you want to buy your chicken from a farm shop or from Tesco? You know, it's like in the new auction house, it's just, you know, it's all kind of nameless and stuff. Whereas maybe in the past for a bunch of people that felt a bit more tight just because of how the game was. So if we moved Modern WoW back to that, I think we'd lose a whole bunch in the process. I think instead the thing to do is to be like, Modern WoW is pretty good at doing what Modern WoW does. I mean, you're playing a WoW raid, there's nothing quite like it. You know,
for sure.
Denathrius Phase
100%.
3, pretty hard to get that level of good fun elsewhere. And I guess opt-in stress. If you're a ranged and you get double Fatal Finessed.
That's the way to put it.
So instead, what we need to do is think, how can we broaden that? And I think that talk about, you know, WoW Classic is the smallest, but it feels the biggest.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's because it feels a little bit more sandboxy in how some of it plays out. And that's basically what we need.
Yeah. There's a big thing there with how the community has considered the game solvable over time. Because obviously it's like there's so many factors, like specifically exploration in terms of it feels the biggest is like, yeah, we're running everywhere at once, we're teleporting everywhere, we know where our destination is, and we've seen it all before effectively, or it's all like super systematized in how it is in our head and how we approach it. They kind of going back to the old argument of we're not kids anymore, being immersed in this big world, like, oh, what's over there? We're kind of like, we know in our head, oh, there's nothing over there. Or it's like, is there something over there? No, because Handy Notes doesn't tell me there's a treasure there, which means there's not. So there's a lot of that involved, but I think and in trying to get to my point, I've absolutely lost it. But don't worry, there's many more. It's like you say, it's focused. You go in with a game plan, whereas in like you go in, I gotta go do this, and it's like one step to there. Whereas going to Classic, you're like, what am I doing today? Oh, well, my checklist of things I need is like 10 long, and they're all different directions, as opposed to being the case of, oh, what am I doing? M+, all right, button, M+, go.
Yeah, plus, I mean, you have Epic Ground Mount, and you have the fastest flying mount right now.
Yep.
But there was a point in time where that was a new thing. And just the journey you had to go on to achieve that goal was itself pretty big. And we don't have as many of those things in the game because you can't, I mean, are we going to be no-clipping through the map at 600% speed at the cost of, 5 million gold?
Please.
What do they do?
Please.
So it's that thing where they have to just contend with power and ability creep, where a lot of what would have made a game like that feel like you've got these big, lofty goals and almost sandboxy ways to get to those goals. Those are big, lofty goals we've all already achieved. How do we re-achieve them? Who knows?
Yeah,
so
I think I have a really good visual comparison. If I could, I wish I had like a little sketch pad I could draw on, because you know the like TBC and vanilla attunement charts,
yeah,
where it is this massive flow chart of everyone's going everywhere all over the place. Because of like how M+ and stuff goes now, it is basically there's still as much like gameplay time involved, if not more. But there's now significantly fewer nodes on that chart.
Yes, that's it.
It is just, you're going from, like, start here, you go do your normal dungeons to get your gear, you do your heroic dungeons to get your gear, you do your mythic dungeons to get your gear, you do your mythic plus. It's not, you go speak to the wizard in the cave, and then he sends you off to the pirate in the, like, southern cove, and then you go to here. Obviously, I've just completely made up examples.
I get the point, though,
I don't remember, but it's a case of it doesn't quite feel as mystical or weird anymore. It's not it's just it's Destiny. It's Destiny, get your item level up, whereas it doesn't.
Speaking of mystical and weird, we do have our next super chat, which is from Miko, who says, the secret finding community is currently the biggest WoW community. What is your opinion in secrets in general and how underrepresented they feel right now? So, as to whether the biggest or not, I mean, who knows? The secret finding Discord's pretty damn big, though. So what's your opinion on secrets in general and how underrepresented they feel? It's weird because there was secret-ish feeling content of all of the neat things you could do to get a few mounts at the start of this expansion that I thought was pretty cool. Yeah. But that's kind of ran dry. And my overall opinion here is basically the secrets are really cool. But what I'd almost rather have is the creativity shown in the creation of the secrets and how you do so many of them, like Una and stuff.
Yes.
I just like to see that, but more applied to just give us more like Chromie-like content, Deaths of Chromie and things like that. And then I guess also more features. I have to wonder if Blizzard, like, they did all of the really cool secrets, like, I mean, come on, the Nightmare Mount.
Those are nightmares.
Going through that like maze. I mean, I did that when I hadn't slept in 24 hours and I was going through that maze. It was a nightmare. Really cool though. I felt great at the end.
Yeah. No, I hated it, but in just the right way.
Yeah. So I feel like the thing to do there is maybe for the actual secrets and treasure hunts, double down on those and keep it so that it's like they're not leading to developer resource intensive mini games that are then really hard to find. Yeah. I do think that those mini games should not be in the form of a secret. I think they should be in the form of like just a wacky new bit of content, because I think that would be better for more players. But I then think the other side of that admission, or of making that decision, would be more breadcrumbs, more treasure hunts and stuff like that, because it's just cool and fun. And the more they can do with that community, the better. It's just, for me, I think that it is a higher priority to get the solo in the world, or even group in the world content in a good place first. And I would say we should probably spend less time focusing on the secrets until we have got that general world gameplay way better. And then, absolutely more secrets. I think the secrets have been awesome. Yeah.
Here's my take on it is a little bit interesting, because obviously the secret finding community is strong, and they're all having a great time in the Discord, trying to solve like Fiesel's absolute madness, trying to figure out like, oh, here's 3 rocks. Is this what we're looking for? That kind of stuff, where it's like, I have no idea how any of them figure stuff out.
It's incredible.
Doing the Lucid Nightmare stuff, going through the Una steps, I'm like, Jesus, this is like, I don't know if just threw stuff at a wall to see what sticks, or if it's like actually like properly solved using some like teases from the big man himself. But man, it's really interesting. But, and here's the big but, for the vast majority of players, that, as far as I'm concerned, is an interesting Wowhead article to read, and then a series of steps to follow and not think about and go, oh, that's kind of cool. Whereas they should take the same concept, but blow it up a little more.
Yeah.
Take it out and go, okay, right, here's almost AQ style of just require community participation. And I mean big community participation. Like, if it's a thing where like half a server needs to click the rocks in the right order.
Whoa.
Or something like that. Or it takes a 40-man raid, but they all have to be the same realm for some bizarre reason, just to kind of make it stick a little bit better. I think involving the community, the wider community, in stuff like that in whatever way is possible, makes a little bit more sense. And I think that's, like you say, what I'm basically saying is what you said: make it into more content that people can have. Because as much as the secret finding community are great and off in their little, like, I say off their little corner, that sounds really dismissive. It's not my intent.
Yeah.
But it's a case of they're having a great time, but could maybe more players have a great time with the same flavor of stuff, because it is really cool.
Yeah, I'd say generally speaking, it's some of the most innovative, exciting, and just cool content in the game. And no matter what form it comes in, I want to see more of that. Yeah. And it's just great. So more secrets,
absolutely, and
I think more forms of gameplay that are inspired by why people think secrets are cool. Yeah, because it's not just that it's a secret; it's that it's a cool puzzle, a cool challenge.
It harkens back to the kind of almost like Mew been hidden under the truck in Pokemon. It's that kind of stuff where it invokes the same feeling of no way. What do you mean? It's no way. That's so insane. That's so weird. Yeah. That's mystical and very unbecoming of a video game system to have this stuff. So I think it's like, there's nothing to lose by adding more of them. I think more could be done to engage more people, as opposed to getting like, it's almost like how it feels as an outside observer. It feels like Muffinus and his secrets crew and the secret finding community are in this arms race where they're trying to get wackier and wackier and deeper into this rabbit hole, and everyone's just kind of going, sorry, we can't keep up with you down there.
Yeah, it could be happening. So to hop us on over then, we've got a super chat from Robert Osborne, who says, I don't like how my player power for the entire expansion is tied to Torghast. Is there a good way for Blizzard to fix this? Will they change it? potentially good news. Maybe. It's hard to know exactly what will happen. I will tell you what we do know after I take a breath, because wow, my vocal cords are very sore right now.
It's only been almost 3 hours.
Yeah, that's what happens when you project your voice for 3 hours straight.
Yeah.
But great question, Robert. Yeah, you're essentially getting to all my player power. Not all, but a large part of my player power is my legendaries, and those are tied to Torghast. I need my Soul Ash. I don't want to do Torghast to get my Soul Ash. I think the answer is... Is that actually, I was going to say it's pretty simple. It's not. How are they going to remove Soul Ash? Because we're kind of limited to only having Soul Ash. So I think what Robert's going to get is not what he wants, but it's going to be an improvement over what he's got right now. Where imagine a world where Torghast is only the twisting corridors and you're expected to fail. And it's like a run in any other roguelike game where you go in, you do your best, and whatever you get at the end is going to be useful to you. Be that in getting higher the next time or in your other stuff. At least that would mean that you could get your Soul Ash by doing the fun version of Torghast and not the kind of nerfed down, kind of gimped, kind of boring, 6 floors of a layer 8, have fun. Nobody finds that fun, because the fun in Torghast can't actually come out because you don't have enough scaling. You don't have enough powers. It's like, what if, the only way to progress in Dead Cells was to do the first 2 levels and then your run stops? That would be insane.
No, I refuse to imagine it. I refuse.
Yet that is what it is right now. So yeah, that's what I'm going to say to Robert. I think it is going to be tied into Torghast via the Soul Ash system and the Rune Carver. There could be a simple way to do that where they could just put Soul Ash on a cap and just throw it into, they could throw it into raiding or throw it into M+ and PvP, and they could make it so that if you're doing that content, you never need to touch Torghast. But if you're just a casual player, you don't want to get into that grouped content, you can still get your legendaries via Torghast. They could do that. I think more than likely they'll try to make Torghast something that you actually want to do and you feel is fun. Right, I seriously, I 100% believe it could be extremely fun. It's just that right now it's like put together in a bit of an odd way. But Blizzard know that. They've literally said that to me in an interview. So hopefully getting better.
Yeah, I mean, I think the simplest way is either throw in other stuff or just add a times the amount you get by 5, because you won't need any more, because we're 235 legendaries. Just kind of, if you haven't engaged with it by 9.1 or 9.2, you're probably never going to, so they'll likely throw you a bone and say, there you go. Sorry you didn't like it. Here it's a bit better. Get your stuff quicker. There.
Yeah.
At least I imagine so.
I think probably around time to finish up. We do have 2 more super chats. So. We have 100. I now found out the DKKs are Danish krone. Which, I mean, I should be able to know because I really like Iceland. I've been there a few times, and, ISK, Icelandic kroner, is their currency. And also ISK from EVE Online, the Icelandic game. So yes, Lars, thank you for the super chat, who says, lost all interest in WoW, but still enjoy the lore videos. Hey, I mean, at least you're getting something out of the Warcraft franchise.
Certainly not alone.
And I hope you enjoyed today's video as well, because we did another big chunky lore video. And once I'm finished with my 9.0.5, actually no, you're leading that.
Yes.
Dakor is getting the gearing guide, and I am doing the whispers of N'Zoth and Xal'atath and Il'gynoth and everyone video, because that'll be quite fun. Thank you, Lars. And to cap us off, we have Drocrest. Oh,
Drocrest?
Who says Drocrest? Yes, I'm not good at speaking sometimes. Bit of an odd field I got myself into then.
Certainly.
Who says, curious your thoughts on how Blizzard tends to shelve characters for their reveals. With Nathanos being MIA since pre-patch, what will he become? I think this one's simple enough for the core of the question.
Yes.
Basically, they don't have enough screen time. I mean, they don't even have enough screen time to properly do justice to the characters that are in the focus of the expansion. I think that's just because Blizzard needs to put more time into characters in the game. It is basically just as simple as that. So until that happens, the weird thing of so many characters are shelved for so long that's just going to be an issue. Now, I'm going to throw you a bit of lore that's fun. In the N'Zoth fight, we see the Vision, which is going to Sylvanas and Ashara, having their bargain. And Ashara's like, yeah, I'm not blind to who you're really working for, though. And that means that Ashara knows about the jailer.
Yes.
So Ashara's in the shelf. Mm-hmm. When is she going to come back? Is it going to be, in reference to that line, thwarting Sylvanas' plans? Because we do know that Ashara basically pisses off to do cosmic stuff. So what's going to happen there?
Yeah, I think one of the problems with how they shelve characters is that we know that's what they're doing. They don't like quietly put someone in the back corner or send someone off on an important mission to come back later. Whereas I'm going to go to FF14 for this comparison because of the Stormblood stuff. There are characters that come back and I'm like, oh yeah, that guy. I haven't seen him in ages. And then it turns out like when I last saw him, it was like, yeah, oh, he's off to do a scouting mission. And he comes back with detail, and it makes sense to me and feels fine because I'm spending loads of time with a cast of characters anyway, and I'm spending loads of time with them, and they all have natural things to do that don't involve being around. Like in Thanos, I think it's because they have so little screen time that it always feels like there's no like casual like interaction with the Thanos, Sylvanas, Ashara, Anduin, Bolvar. It's all like big stuff.
Yeah.
They only have the time that feels important.
And I think that's what, I mean, it just hurts people with the lore, you know. It's like, I mean, even those in-game cutscenes, they look awful. I don't mean the in-game like pre-rendered stuff. I mean those ones where the characters emote about and the camera moves. Yeah. They suck. They're so bad. And they've been bad for ages.
Yeah.
I would rather the characters just emote like characters in the world, and that we don't have to put the dev time into, you know, a quest designer deciding it's time to be a cinematographer. Rarely works out super good. I don't mean that as an offensive thing, but I mean that as in you either do those as good as FF does them, or you don't do them at all, and you just focus on the character content. So what I would like to have is actually less cutscenes, less stuff like that, and just more time spent with our characters in a low-key way where it's just characters walking about, doing a quest, emoting some text, nice and simple, and just more of that. But yeah, it's that, man, it is just that thing of screen time. How do we get more screen time? And I think that's probably just... It comes down to, you know, if you had a whole bunch of old school reputations, as an example, you could tie in some characters into that, and then bam, you could have a bunch more content.
Yeah, it's like, here's something I was kind of thinking there. How many of the dungeons in the Shadowlands have anything to do with Anduin or Bolvar or Sylvanas? 0.
Yeah. Because they need to put the screen time into the Covenants, or else you won't know them.
Yeah.
But, oh dear, we don't have enough screen time. You know, I mean, even like Jaina, like Dalaran was supposed to come in over Siege of Orgrimmar and be bombarding, and that was supposed to be a big old thing. Yeah. But they were like, oh, we can't really do this. We don't have time. So it's really hard. Yeah. I think that if they lower the bar of what the presentation has got to be like, perhaps we could get more time with those characters. And that's basically just what I'd say there.
Yeah, it's just literally just give us loads of text and have Anduin walk around with us for a while if we're Alliance, or I mean, guess now in the Shadowlands, it doesn't matter. Have Anduin and Bolvar walk around with us, well, eventually. Just let us know who these characters are. Give them humanizing moments as opposed to, you know, big like super CGI. This is their crowning moment. You're like, who's that?
Yeah, everything for Blizzard's like everything has to be an epic moment. Yeah, you know, it has to be a, you know, whether it's a tearjerker or the Alliance, whatever. It's got to be that. But it's like, no, those moments only matter if they have room to breathe, and in between them is a lot of other stuff. And I think they need more of the other stuff. For sure. Quick follow up from Robert, who basically was just saying, yeah, I don't like roguelites though, so why do I have to do a roguelite? Get my soul ash. Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah, fair. I do not think that should be a situation. I think Torghast should be Torghast. It should be great for the reasons that it's great, and for the players who think it's cool. Not something that you should feel like you have to do. So I do fundamentally agree.
Yeah.
To finish off with our final super chat from Mr. 10S. When will druids or shamans get new forms, if ever? I honestly cannot answer any of that to you, but I can say thank you for the super chat, and also that stuff's good. That's in the realm of player customization. One of the nice things with Legion is that now that you can unlock those things in a more permanent way, and transmog into them, I mean, look at that. It's done really well. So, yeah, it's kind of an unanswerable question without knowing Blizzard's plans.
Yes.
But I would say that the more drives for customization and stuff like that, the better. And yeah, more forms is cool. I mean, the stuff with my soul shape. It's got all of its different forms.
Yeah.
I guess there is so much they could do. I mean, they could even do a more simple thing of trying to swap out the models of like other bears in the game.
Yeah.
And you could maybe create content like that.
Yep.
You know, you could get the something of the Northrend Druid, and that could unlock a slew of Northrend animals that you get to be as a Druid. And you could do that for everything. And then the Druids will all be really happy. They get some cool new content to do.
It's a case of can you tie that into anything else? Can you have a Druid Greenfire?
I was about to say that.
Yeah.
Druid Greenfire purely because it's cool.
Yeah.
And bam, you're going to get people talking.
Yep.
I almost wish Blizzard had a kind of like, it's like almost like a special projects team, but like basically a squad whose big job was just like every minor patch or maybe every patch, we're going to do a Greenfire. And that's just the special projects team.
What stuff are we not doing? Like, what can we do? Anything else? Just pure, like, not obviously not like fucking carte blanche. Sorry to swear, but like, just go for it. Just go.
Yeah.
Here's Warlock Greenfire. Here's Druid Forbes the Northrend. Here's I'm trying to think what could a shaman become that would make a lot of sense. I guess they've got Ghost Wolf. Why is there nothing that's a little more fitting to each of the races for that form? Obviously, I mean, there's no real reason. There's Raptor, there's Ghost Wolf. They could do so many more things there, and just make it cool and tie it into whatever you want.
Yeah.
Just even the case of my idea from earlier with the ensemble set for doing time walking, just to have something like that for other classes. You don't even need to like make super new content. Just go, all right, here's a bunch of old models from, like, I'm trying to think. I can't think of any specifics, but just here's a bunch of models from this era of the game. You can be them now. And readability won't be a problem because you've got a big blue nameplate. Everybody knows you're shaman.
Yeah.
That's it.
So I think the more class specific stuff, the better.
For sure. Absolutely.
Whew. And I think that is what draws us to a close because it has been almost 3 hours.
Yeah.
A big thank you to new channel member Dorith. Also, super chatters Jay-Z, Lars, Grant, Cameron, Colin, Eric, Mike. No, not Mike. Miko. James, Robert, Lars again. Drochrist, 10S. Thank you, everybody. And also people in chat, Lorecrafty, Schmons, Dolphbloods. Dyslexia makes it hard to do names sometimes. Faded Emperor, Slash, Max, 10S, Jessica, Raina, thank you for hanging out with us in terms of next steps. One of the great places to go and to subscribe to is youtube.com/ No, we do not have a URL for it.
Do not just yet.
Bellular Clips. That is where well, not the raw feed of the cameras yet, but eventually the raw feed of the cameras will go to the editing team. And that is where we've got a bunch of stuff. The channel is now partnered. So it is now a partnered YouTube channel. That's all pretty fun and hype. There it is.
Yep.
If you click in the videos tab,
Yes,
you will actually see that's a big old lot of content. If you want to watch me and Matt eat some tasty stacks for Boxu, our sponsor, then you can
Never mind, I can't do none of this.
watch us for a long time eat snacks.
Yep.
That was a really fun one to do.
Yeah.
Because our upload is happening, it's defaulting to 480p. Sweet.
That's true.
But there's so much content there, and whenever we stream, we will get the best bits and we'll put them there. So if you're joining this stream late, if you've missed other streams, we really want to make that a really good, polished, fun viewing experience where basically you can look at that and you're like, wow, here's a grab bag of so many different topics and clips. And even for things like lore, like there's so many times we just have off-the-cuff lore discussions. They would not fit a main channel video, but it's cool lore that you may find fun, like how time really works in the World of Warcraft, where that's stuff that we do there. So that is the place to subscribe to. If you want to support us in another way and also get some sweet loot, there is over on the Patreon where, in addition to things like the behind the scenes, I did a vlog on my really cool iPad arm that I kind of custom made. Basically, my iPad snaps onto a monitor arm, and it's awesome. And a bunch of other stuff there, and also get the art, which we've been working on today, actually.
Yep.
And the pins. Then the Patreon is the place for that.
Absolutely.
My vocal cords are about to explode.
Yeah,
So if I keep on going, I won't be able to record any videos, and we'll have no 9.1 content and no stream next week. So,
fantastic.
in the spirit of all of that, thank you. We had a blast together. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight, and we will.
Just before you go, that channel member was Drorith, right?
Drorith.
That's Leon.
That's Leon.
Thanks, Leon.
Hello, Leon. Leon is the warlock that you can see in our rating footage.
God bless that man and his summons.
Oh, yeah.
And also his Valheim smithing. God damn. Yeah, so I think that'll do us for today. It has been 3 hours. Ooh, boy.
Yep, been 3 hours. It is now 11.
Yeah. Oh, Christ. Thank you very much,
All
everyone.
right. Cheers, everyone. Have a great night. See you later.
Next time.